What's going on, everyone? It's jeranism back again for another episode of GLOBEBUSTERS Live, episode number 9. And I'm here, as always, with my two sidekicks. We got Xanadude60. Bob, how's it going?
Doing really well, Jaron. It's been an interesting week. Lots to talk about this week, and tonight we have two outstanding guests. I'm really looking forward to tonight's show.
Me too. And how's it going, TJ?
Hello, everyone. It's been quite the busy day. I didn't get very much done that I needed to for myself, but did put out a couple videos. So if you didn't check those out, definitely check those out. Especially did one on a astronaut of a NASA and a NASA astronaut. She dropped a space bag that was about the size of a book bag, and it gets really fascinating because they had people on the ground tracking this space bag as it orbited 17,000 miles an hour around Earth, and even one person video recorded that and uploaded it to the internet so everyone can see, which I'm still confused as how someone tracked a book bag around the Earth, but they did it, so it must have been real.
And we got two guests today, so let's start off with, they're both named Dave, so we'll make it easy and call one of them Dave Weiss. Dave Weiss, how's it going?
Going very well. Thanks, Jaron.
I know, it gets confusing. I get called that a lot. Or it's jeranism if you want.
I'll call you one of those three.
And we also have Allegedly Dave. Allegedly, how's it going?
Hi there, chaps. How's it going?
So nice to have you guys. Appreciate you being on the show. We'll start with Dave Weiss. Can you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and where you come from and where they can find your work?
I'll keep it short. I live near New York City on the coast. I woke up on 9/11 when I watched the towers go poof from my shoreline, not on television, and knew something was wrong within. I didn't say anything about it for about 4 years, and then I really started waking up to that. And I have a show called Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole out of New York City, where we talk about all these different falsehoods that are going on in the world and try to make fun of them best that we can. And then I'd say about 9 months ago, I started waking up to the flat Earth and kind of kept that in my back pocket for quite some time because it's hard to wrap your mind around. But now I'm out, so you can find me on SoundCloud or iTunes, I believe we're on. I also was the host with John LeBon and Matrix Decoded. We did the show Ball Earth Skeptic, and I have a Facebook page called Ball Earth Skeptic for those of you that want to see compilations of everyone's work that I kind of just bring together for people that don't have 24/7 to research this stuff like I do.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Love some of your work, so glad you're here. And Allegedly Dave.
Hi there. I'm Allegedly Dave. I'm from England, but right now I'm actually in Turkey. So it's about 4 o'clock in the morning here. Now I've got a similar story to Dave actually. I was actually in New York, right across the river from the World Trade Center when it went down, and I too didn't wake up until a few years later when it dawned on me what actually happened, and I've been on an amazing journey ever since. I came across flat Earth 11 months ago, and I've got to the point now where I'm I was convinced that we weren't clinging to a ball, but now I'm 100% sure that we're on a flat Earth, and discovered the Creator along the way. So you can find my stuff. Basically, I've got a website called allegedlydave.com, and my YouTube channel is dmurphy25. That's me.
All right, awesome. It's great to have you. So first thing I just wanted to get off and make sure everyone understands what's going on there is I'm sure most of you guys saw, or everyone saw, that Joseph Climera has made a video today, this morning. It was nice to wake up to. I went to our chat, and Tinfoil Hat Girl was there, and she said, "What's up with Joseph Climera?" I said, "I don't know. Why did he post something weird on Facebook or something?" She said, "He put out a video saying that you're blackmailing him for a bunch of money." And I said, "He what?" I said, "I haven't seen that video yet. I got to go check it out." So headed over there and saw that he made a completely baseless accusation. I actually wasn't even upset seeing it. It was kind of funny. And then scrolling down and seeing some of the comments is kind of when I got upset, because I saw a lot of people who were just saying, "Oh, I can't believe he did this," and "Oh, I knew jeranism had something wrong with him. I knew he was too good to be believed," or just nonsense like that. And it just hit me as everything I do in every video I make, and I'm always saying, don't trust men, look for evidence, do your own research. And somebody who can come out and make I don't even know if the video was longer than a minute, may have been in 2, but however long it was, had zero evidence in it. It was just somebody speaking words, making accusations, and from that, people were able to deduce the fact that it must be true before even asking me or waiting for any kind of a response on my part. And also kind of got 3 or 4 Facebook messages from people saying, I knew you were fake. You're as fake as NASA." It's like, what? With no evidence, and that was upsetting. So we did have a little Google Hangout this morning. I did make a video. It's not ever what I want to do. Hopefully people know that the last thing I'm about is ever calling anybody out or calling somebody by name, saying they're a shill, this or that. I even hate that word. But in this case, obviously I can't just let somebody trash my name just because of something that he did. And I'll cover that real quick with TJ's help. But Bob, any opinion on that to start before I kind of tell everybody exactly why he did what he did?
Well, no, not really. I mean, I was kind of taken aback by the whole thing in the first place. It just surprised me to see somebody come out and say something like that, for no apparent reason. And honestly, I think even his claims of, notifying the police and all that stuff were just ridiculous. And I posted on his page a comment that said, why don't you show us, the proof, maybe some Skype logs, something like that. Never got a response. In fact, I was blocked immediately. And so yeah, there's something really fishy going on with it. It's ridiculous, and all this is doing is just causing more discontent, I think, in the movement, and not a good thing.
Nope, I'd agree. And TJ actually helped me out a little bit in this whole deal, and I'll kind of make it as short as I can in 3 or 5 minutes here. The reason why he did that was because it was about 3 or 4 days ago that I made a post backing Patricia Steer, because I had asked on Facebook for people's reasons for basically gang tackling her, is what I would call it. On Facebook, it looked like they were coming from every direction, and people were posting pictures and jokes and cartoons, and it just seemed like, man, people are just, why don't we focus this energy on something positive rather than this nonsense? So I asked people, can you please tell me what it is that you find shill-like behavior? And after about a couple hours, 4 or 5 hours, there was 80 or so responses. And besides, somebody didn't like the kind of music that she had on the wall behind her. Somebody made the comment about drinking blood, which I'll allow allegedly Dave to kind of talk about here in a little bit. And another thing was that she talked too much about herself during her first interview, which I was just floored by. And so I just made a post that basically said, I think you guys are putting your energy and your excitement all in the wrong direction. That, to me, I saw, here comes this fresh face. It's a female. She's well-spoken. She's bringing people to the flat earth. She's talking about, love the creator, talking about why you shouldn't be an atheist, talking about not killing animals, and nothing bad at all. And then you have all these people basically gang tackling her. So I just told people, what you're doing is you're falling right into the traps of the government, who wants dissension. They want conflict. They want anger. They want racism. because all that does is keep us at each other's throats. And when that's happening, then chaos happens and they can get away with their little behind the scenes things. Whereas if we ever as a people just realized that our power is in the fact that we outnumber them 1,000,000 to 1, if not well over that. And if we ever came together and actually put our efforts in the right direction, I think we'd all be absolutely floored at the results. And so I wrote that post and just thought everything was going to be fine. Well, the next morning I log on and there was back to back 4 messages from Joseph Climera that said, "Oh, way to go, you idiot! Now we know you're a shill. I've always known you were a shill, you piece of ass, and you're worthless experiments. You're an amateur, blah blah blah." Well, I just passed it off as, well, here's another guy just going off, and closed that chat box. And then I went to my feed page and saw that a girl named Claudia Dobos had made 2 or 3 posts in a row that said, one of them said, "You're a globehead," the next one said, "Jeranism all-star shill." And so I just was taken aback by, man, these 2 people are the only ones that really are saying something. And I had never really heard or thought about this Claudia Dobos, so I clicked on her picture, wanted to see her pop up, and I'm looking at the picture thinking, that picture looks like a model. That doesn't look like a real person. So I start searching through her images, and sure enough, I'm saying, man, these pictures just look like they're all fake. So I know how to do a reverse search. So I start reverse searching these images. And about the 4th one or 5th one that I reverse search comes up with a modeling website. So I'm looking at this modeling website and seeing this girl on this website and some other pictures that shouldn't be on the internet at all, and kind of said, okay, now this girl's mixed up in some stuff here. So I searched some of those images from that website, and sure enough, pops up a ton of stuff about an Eva Dobos. And the girl's name is Eve Angel, and she is the #1 porn star in Hungary, and one of the most well-known porn stars in the UK and in Europe. So right away I'm thinking, okay, we got a problem here. Like, I think I found a fake Facebook account. So I kind of pop back over and I'm looking, and I notice a very close connection between Joseph and this Claudia. And basically that connection is that they're really good friends, that they comment right after each other. For instance, Climera will post a picture of himself, and it will be followed by this porn star popping in and saying, "Gorgeous man." And he'll post a video that he releases, and she'll come in and say, "Genius." So I'm starting to see a connection there. Of course, I can't jump to any conclusions. Maybe he's friends with this porn star, or I didn't know. So I contacted Shelly Johnson, who was the girl that very first interviewed me a while back. She is the host of Our Natural Rights, which is a show on All Talk Radio. And I had noticed that she had commented on quite a few of his posts and quite a few of her posts. So I just kind of said, "Hey, Shelly, do you know Claudia Dobos by, personally?" And she said, "Well, as personally as you can know somebody on Facebook." And I said, "Okay, so you've talked to her?" And she goes, "Yeah, I've messaged her, and I've also talked to her ex-boyfriend on the phone." And I said, "Oh, who's her ex-boyfriend?" And she said, "Joseph Climera." So I said, "Oh, okay, so they are boyfriend, ex-girlfriend." She goes, "Yeah." I said, "Okay." And I said, "I don't know if you know this." And I sent her some pictures and said, "That girl is a porn star. So do you really think that he is ex-girlfriends with this most famous porn star?" And I said, "And if you look at her account, she only has a couple hundred friends. To me, this porn star who has her own website, basically her own empire, seemed to me like she would have quite a few more friends and followers. And also, if you start to look at the images of this girl, you realize that they are screenshots. None of them are even selfies or pictures that people would normally take, pictures of friends." I started looking into Joseph's account, no pictures of him and her. So I said, "Do you know if they've ever been together?" And she said, "Oh, well, yeah, actually, sometimes Joseph is over her house." I said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "But now that you mention it, it is kind of weird because he'll tell me he's going over there and then 3 minutes later say, 'Hey, I'm here.' And he'll be writing as if he's at Claudia's house." I said, "Okay, that's interesting." And then she said, "Also, one night he was there because she was scared of ghosts and he needed to put her to bed. And he was there, and then I asked him, this is talking about Shelley, Shelley asked him, when are you going to sleep? You haven't slept in a while. And he said, yeah, I usually don't sleep a lot. I'm just going to fall asleep here with my head on the laptop like I usually do. And she said, okay, well, I'll talk to you later. And she woke up the next morning to a message from Claudia saying, oh, I woke up this morning and Joseph is asleep here with his head on the laptop. And she said at that time she found that as strange. Well, I'm starting to put two and two together here, did a couple more searches, contacted TJ and said, TJ, you want to help me go on a little goose chase here? And as we searched, it became painfully obvious that Mr. Joseph runs a little bit of a double life and has done so for the last 4 years. He acts as both himself and his ex-girlfriend, who is the so-called Claudia Dobos, who doesn't exist because the actual girl's name is Ava Dobos, and she is a porn star and very famous. And we also found her real Facebook page, which has 45,000 followers. So basically, long story short, I knew we had a problem. I also knew that the reason that Patricia got ragged on so much was simply because he would post something bad about her, and then Claudia would come and back him up. And also, in talking to Patricia, as soon as he first attacked her, the next thing she knew, this Claudia Dobos girl had gone to every one of her photos in her Facebook account and said that she needed medication, that she needed to see a doctor, she was a crazy lady. So it all started to make sense. I went and looked at my messages, and the very first day Claudia Dobos ever private messaged me, was on June 25th. Anyone want to take a guess as to what day the first day Joseph Climera messaged me was? June 25th. Imagine that. So it became painfully obvious exactly what was going on, and so I decided to do the nice guy thing, which you learn your lesson by being a nice guy. I just thought to myself I would give him a chance to delete the fake accounts and to apologize to Patricia, apologize to Mark, and because I like his work, to be honest. He's doing experiments. I don't have a problem with his videos except for the shill ones, and so I said, I want to give him a chance to kind of come out of this, delete this account, admit what he did, and go forward. Wasn't really thinking, I guess. I emailed him, and the email simply said, can you please tell me what your connection is to Ava and Claudia Dobos and the porn? And that's the only time I've messaged him. Over the course of the next day or two, I was messaging him, hello, are you there? And he then sent back a very lengthy apology, basically saying he felt really bad. He wanted to offer an olive branch of peace. He sent an image of a dove holding an olive branch and said, I think it'd be best if we all just put this behind us and went forward and made it a new day and not talk about shills anymore. Well, that's, of course, not what I was getting at all. I was more concerned with the fact that he's faking people, which, how do you not have a problem with that when we're in a truth movement? We're supposed to be out doing experiments. The last thing I want is an experiment by somebody who is willing to lie about his identity in order to back himself up. So I just continued waiting for him to respond to my messages and kept saying through Skype and through Facebook messaging, like, hey, I have something I need to talk to you about, hello. And he was not responding. And I just figured, well, I guess I'm going to have to do something, either come out with a video or a post. And that's what happens when you're nice to somebody, because you get to wake up on Monday morning and find out somebody is now accusing you of blackmail. So luckily I have all the evidence that exactly the way it went down. Also, these are things that I had been talking to Bob about 2 days earlier. Same thing with TJ. These are things that they knew that was going on early this weekend. Same thing with Shelley. Same thing with Patricia. So that's why this morning Patricia Steer, myself, TJ, and Shelley Johnson all had a 2-hour Google Hangout just to kind of have everybody tell their story and make sure that everything was out in the open about what happened and exactly why he did what he did. And I'll just say that it was certainly not a smart move by him, because there's no way he would come out ahead in it if he just would have responded to my simple request of, will you tell me how you're involved with these two girls? then we can talk about it. And I actually had every intention on giving him a chance to apologize to everyone and go forward from there. But now he's, at least in my opinion, he's completely ruined his reputation. I'm not certainly going to follow any of his videos or even watch any of his experiments because, for all I know, he's faking every bit of the results. So it makes no difference to me if he discovered that the Earth is flat tomorrow with the best experiment ever. I'd simply tell people I wouldn't trust it. He could be faking it.
Yeah, Jaron, and there's one other thing I just want to throw in here real quick because I know both Dave and Dave have something to say about this. But you know, he said that this actually took place in a Skype conversation this morning, right before he had posted the video. And you know, I have to love the universe and its sense of humor and sense of irony, because if you check the news, you will see that Skype released very publicly all over the internet that they were down and offline during the very period of time that he allegedly had the Skype conversation with you. And I just saw that and had to chuckle a little bit because it's like, could your timing have been any worse, Joseph? So
that's what I said in the video. I said, is this karma playing out live in front of our eyes? But regardless, even if that didn't happen, luckily I save all my. I think everybody does. Skype saves all your conversations, and don't know what he was thinking. I just feel like he knew he had no way out. I guess he had gone to Shelley a few times and said, you know, Jaron's acting really weird. I don't know why he's acting weird, and she just she knew what I knew, but wasn't telling him. That was kind of our little plan, and he just must have had like nowhere to run, and basically said, well, if I beat him to the punch, I'll just make an accusation, and I don't think it's going to help him very much. I think it's going to end up really hurting him, and especially, you know, when everybody comes out and says what they know. TJ, do you want to just give a quick little rundown of how things went on Saturday?
Let's see. Besides when you tried to get me in trouble.
No, I did get you in trouble.
Almost got me punished.
I had him looking at this girl's sites.
Yeah, be looking at porn.
And his wife walked in. Sorry about that.
Well, this Jaron brought up this Claudia Dobos, which I already had kind of a situation with, where she was always posting on Eric Dubé's Facebook posts. So I kept seeing her on there, and I was like, who is this girl that just has this time to sit around and just post on people's stuff? And then she posted that he was a shill or something like that, and how Eric Dubé was, it was confirmed because she has a contact in the CIA, and this contact confirmed that he was definitely a shill or working for them or whatever. And my thought was like, there's no way this girl has a contact in the CIA. And then to come out and say that this CIA person confirmed that he was a shill, I'm like, it just sounds so ridiculous. And so I called her out on it, and I was like, I've got a contact in the CIA, and they said, you're a shill. Now disprove me. And so I looked at her Facebook page, and I saw all these pictures, and it was like, these pictures are not real. This is not a real person. I mean, this is completely faked. And because when you see it, I mean, it's basically a bunch of pictures. Some of them look like they're from porn, because as we discovered, they are from porn pictures. And it's like, this is not a Facebook page of a real-life girl that's extremely active on Facebook. Just there's no way. So I just kind of went on with life, and then Jaron started talking about her and Joseph. So we started looking into it, and so I started trying to find this Claudia Dobos online, and just came across a YouTube profile. And that was, I mean, there really wasn't much out there. And so then he was telling me how her sister, Eva, was a porn star. So I looked up her, and I mean, there's unlimited amount of resources out there about this Eva Dobos, and all these porn pictures and everything else, like all these sites and everything. And so I found Eva's real Facebook page, and just looking through, like, now this is more like what someone that's a porn star, what they would have, they have some 50,000 or so followers, and all these guys posting on her page, and she's sharing like there's like real pictures. She's promoting other porn stars and hanging out with friends and whatever, and also was doing a little bit of traveling. So I was like, this is a more realistic person. I could believe that this is the real person. And trying to remember other details. Which I mean,
Well, that's
if
good. I
once
mean,
you upload that video, I mean, this got all the details from 4 different people that will give you a big picture of everything.
yep. And I also go through because, like I said, they both started messaging me June 25th, and never drew a connection with them, so I didn't expect anybody else to. I get so many messages, I read them, I respond and kind of move on. So I never really paid attention that they kind of work off each other. And she sent a message a while back that said, I've got somebody in British intelligence that knows that Eric Dubé is a COINTEL pro, and make sure you sever all connections with him. And just really weird, because when she posts on the feeds, it's like she has broken English, but if she messages you privately, she speaks English just fine. So anyway, when you guys see the video, again, I hate to do that stuff. I would rather have never brought this up, talked about it, and that was kind of exactly my plan. Was I didn't want to call him out when I found out what I found out. Was going to talk to him privately and see if I could get him to change his ways, and obviously that's not the case. So allegedly, Dave, you have anything you want to mention on that? I know you got called out too by the same man.
Well, hardly called out, but it's ironic, I think, that he's trying to pull this sort of stuff on people who are very curious and research very well. It's obviously going to bite him in the bum. Now, this Joseph actually contacted me a couple of weeks ago, and he added me on Facebook and added me on Skype. Now, he seemed very eager to talk to me, but every time he called me on Skype, I was actually in another call, so I had to keep saying, sorry, I'll call you back some other time. But then suddenly, after I said that to him the second time, he deleted me off of Facebook and deleted me off of Skype, which is very odd, I thought. So after seeing your experience with him, I went back and had a look at the Skype chat that we had. And looking at it a second time, something kind of jumped out at me, that he started the conversation with saying that he lived in the same town as I did. And he mentions a couple of landmarks, and I thought, okay, that's cool. But later on in the chat, I said, oh, so you must know the Five Bells, which is a pub, a very famous pub close to where I used to live, which would have been pretty much next door to where he claimed he lived. And he said, oh, I don't know what that is. So I thought, oh, that's odd. So I went on Google Maps and zoomed into the area that he mentioned, and noticed that all the landmarks he pointed out were the only ones that showed up on Google Maps. So it looks to me that he was trying to build a rapport with me by saying he lived in the next town or close to me, and he was trying to sort of I don't know. I mean, I don't know what his motives are, but he was trying to get to talk to me for some reason, and he was using that as a vehicle. So my spidey senses went off right there. So yeah, very fishy guy, and I think you're you've got hang on, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep, we got you.
Oh yeah, sorry, everything just went blank here for a second. Yeah, so yeah, you're quite right to call this guy out, because there's definitely something fishy about him.
Yeah, and I don't, like I said, I've never called out shills, because even if they're bringing 80% truth and 20% false, to me, I'll take the 80%, and I'm capable of recognizing the 20 and just kind of kicking it out. And I don't think that that's necessarily derail. I never understood the calling of Mark Sargent a shill, who really opened my eyes to the flat Earth, and I just never quite understood why a shill would come into the movement and speak a lot about the flat Earth, but throw in some miscellaneous. But this is a different situation in my mind, because simply he's definitely got some vendettas that he's trying to settle, or he's got some people that he is definitely going after. And when you're using fake people to back up your nonsense, well, obviously that needs to stop. And so hopefully this stops it. I'm going to be anxious to see how many subscribers he has, just because I'm just kind of seeing what people are really looking for, if they're really looking for truth. Because if they are, when you find out something like this, with all the evidence that's in the video, and I think that video might even actually be posted now. It was taking days to process, but it'll be interesting to see what happens if he deletes those fake people. He's actually been acting as that person for 4 years, so it certainly will be interesting. Dave Weiss, have you ever had any run-ins with him, or anything you remember?
You know what's funny is I never heard of the guy, and randomly, before I knew about any of this, I came across one of his videos, short, funny. He kind of reminded me like PK getting upset at stuff, and I was like, wow, that's funny. So I reached out to the guy. I actually sent him a message, and then literally 5 minutes later, Patricia pointed out that that's the guy that made this video about her, and I hadn't seen that video yet, and I was like, are you kidding me? And I realized that he's not joking around in the way he's acting, because it comes off as very funny. Yeah,
because he's like an angry little man.
He had some good videos, but now, as you said, I can't trust anything that he's doing. You have to think for yourself and come up with your own experiments. But he's insane. I sent him an email, reaching out to him, said, hey, I'd love to talk to you. Love your work and everything. Then I realized, I also announced to him in that email, which is very funny, that I'm starting a new show on Mike Adams, the Health Ranger. Natural News has a new network called Talk Network, and Patricia and I are doing a show called Truth is Stranger Than Lies. And I even sent him the promo for that show, not knowing that he was the one that made the video about her. And then I just threw my hands up in the air, and I'm like, this guy's nuts. Gosh. It was crazy. I was like, are you kidding me? Patricia told me that was the guy, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I just told him. So he threatened to make a video exposing me, and I didn't tell him not to, because Patricia got a lot of subs out of it. So I was hoping he would make one on me.
Right. I mean, flattery is imitation is the best flattery,
Just like we're giving him subs right now, so the sooner we stop giving energy to this, the better off we all are.
He did say, I was trying to find it. Oh, yeah, it says here, and say hello to Weiss while you are there, and Sergeant, you despicable piece of shit. So just so you know, that was part of his message to me. That's your hello to Weiss.
The whole Sergeant thing, if Sergeant's a shill, all we need is about 5 more just like him, and we'll blow this thing wide open.
Yeah, keep sending him. Well-spoken, makes nice videos, has a soothing voice, bring up lots of good points. That's what we need.
Yeah, he's going to finish us all.
He's sending us down the wrong path. We're all trying to be game designers now or something, I guess. I don't know. Bob, any final words on that before we put that to bed?
No, not really. I mean, I find it unfortunate, and honestly, I wouldn't, in my opinion, I don't think that Joseph is a shill necessarily, if you will. I think for some reason, I've noticed that it seems like every time you do something, Jaron, he comes out with a video or terminology or something that strongly mimics you. So I think that, it's almost like some sort of a psychological thing where he's a wannabe. He wants to be like other people. He wants to be accepted. But, when you start crawling onto the shill train and making wild accusations, akin to what, our other friend Dave does. Dave, what's his name? I forgot his name already.
Clickety-clack
Skulls. Dave. Yes, clickety-clack skulls, Dave. You're really just heading down a bad highway. I think that he made a really critical mistake, and there was no reason for him to do that. because all it does ultimately is just, it just really deteriorates everybody. So it's a shame. That's all I have to say about it.
And Patricia agreed with me that I don't have any hate for anybody. Um, in fact, like Dave Weiss said, I liked his videos. He, in the most recent one, had a little orange on top of a glass and was using a light and showing different things. And I was like, yes, we need more people like that, showing examples. And I try and draw mine, and I'm terrible, and I know that. And a lot of times when I see people who don't quite resonate with what I'm saying, I'm pissed at myself because of my shit-ass drawing. Well, he does it in a different way and it kind of gave me the idea, like, oh, people need to see 3D. So I really liked him, and I still say, hey, he could come out with a video that says, here's what I did. I apologize. I believe in the flat Earth, and I want to continue doing experiments. And I, for one, would even sub him again. But like Dave said, also, can you really trust a guy? But again, I'm willing to forgive anybody. I don't think that's far-fetched. If somebody's honest enough to say, here's what I did, and I sincerely apologize, then who knows? But I don't see that happening. So
that was the latest. The video that you're talking about with the cabbage and the 2 oranges is the concept that you actually brought up. I forget what show it was on, maybe when you were talking to us or whatever, about I think it was the after show on Baller Skeptic, where you're talking about, every 6 months later, how can you possibly see the same stars? So basically, he just took that, made it a minute 3D model, and had his humor. If he was joking, it was very humorous, but I don't think he's joking on the way he's talking.
Actually, Dave, that experiment was taken from the video that Jaron had just released about 8 hours previous in his Global episode 1 thing. And that's actually where that came from.
Don't get me wrong.
The drawing is what was bad.
Don't get me wrong. I encourage people to, if you see something in someone else's video, take it, redo it, just make it better, and it's good. Like Jaron, I was watching one of your recent videos. There was something I have to remember. I can't remember what it was, but I was driving in my car listening. There's about a 30-second clip that I just want to clip out of there and make it a separate video for people that won't sit down and listen to an hour video or a 2-hour video, and just put it in there, and then they'll. The same way, yeah.
I think that's awesome for people to do. In fact, when I see on Facebook people basically just repeating something or taking a portion of it and really harping on it, I love it. I've never once said to anybody, hey, you didn't give me credit for that, or hey, my name's not on that, or how come you took my thing, or because that's not what I'm here for. It's to, I think the more people who hear this, just like I did, it just took that one little bit in my head and everything started to make sense. Everything started to fall together. And so I just want that for the world, and I feel like within a year we can have 50% of this world questioning, like, what the hell? I don't think we live on a spinning ball anymore. And so I don't mind when those things happen, or when I think in that video, his most recent one, he calls Brian Cox crying box, which actually came from Bob, and I used it in my video, and even gave credit to Bob in that video that that's a great name, and he used it, and that's fine because I think it's funny. But again, it gets to this point and you start thinking, I hope he was really thinking on his own, but if he was out there for truth, he certainly shit it out real quick. So nobody else, anything else on that? Okay, that's good. So that video, I think, is uploaded. I can't really check right now, but should be uploaded shortly so people can watch that if you want. And it's long because the hangout this morning was 2 hours, so I tried to sum it up real quick at the beginning. It might be enough for you that you just watch the beginning and don't watch the rest, or if you want, you're free to watch the whole 2.5 hours. No problem there. So I know one of the things that he had really harped on in Facebook, though, was the situation with Patricia and Dave Murphy, or allegedly Dave, when you guys were talking. I'll let you explain it, allegedly, Dave. Exactly what you guys were talking about, how the whole blood thing came up, what was meant by it, and how was it misconstrued.
Yeah, well, I'm quite surprised that this was brought up, because Patricia was talking about how coconut water can be used as a substitute for breast milk. quite an innocent subject, and while she was talking, I interjected and I said, "and blood." And what I meant by that was that coconut water can also be used as a replacement for blood in transfusions. It's the only thing that can be used as a replacement for blood in transfusions. So that's what I was trying to interject there. Now Patricia obviously got what I was trying to say, so she carried on saying, "Yeah, I've heard of that. I get that." So I didn't really get a chance to explain it because, well, she got it, and then we moved on. But I can see how somebody could really, if they tried, construe it as me saying, "Oh yeah, you can feed babies with blood." But if you took it in the context in which we were talking about, I mean, there's no other way to see it.
Yeah, I think you said the right word there when you said if somebody would have to try to see that the wrong way.
Yeah, and I don't know where else it got posted, but I first saw it on Math Power Boyland, his Facebook page, as he does in all caps and in
all
sort
caps.
of very staccato, unintelligible, tiny sentences. It was saying we were talking about satanic ritual abuse and children and all that, and like, so we basically pulled him up on it, and essentially he deleted the post a couple of days later. So I thought, I guess naively, that the whole thing had blown over, but apparently it's still going on.
Yep, well, just wanted to make sure we cleared it up. I know Patricia talks about it in the hangout, but just wanted to make sure I gave you a chance on that.
Well, I'll just say that I think if we did a 3-hour talk and that's the best they can come up with, then I think we did a pretty good talk.
I think so too, absolutely. And in the video, you'll see there is a little bit more to the story as far as possibly what it was that each of us was saying that he didn't like very much. So you'll have to watch the video to get the gist of that. So you guys, I was just thinking in my head, just because it's kind of a funny story. So both you guys were in New York for 9/11, you said, right, Dave? And Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in Connecticut, right on the border of New York, with a clear view of Manhattan.
Wow.
And I was actually directly across the water in Hoboken, on a pier, maybe about a quarter of a mile away.
So I'll tell you my story, and then I'd just like you guys to tell us what you saw that day. But I was working at Long's Drugs, which you may have never heard of. It was a West Coast pharmacy. I was a store manager there. And for that week, I was working 3 to midnight shifts. And so I had gone home the night before at midnight and gone to bed probably 2 o'clock or whatever time I usually went to sleep then. And I woke up the next day at about 2 in the afternoon and showered and got in my car and didn't turn on the TV. Usually when I listen to the radio, I'm listening to music or something. So I drove to work, which was not more than a 3-minute drive or 5-minute drive, and parked. And I remember thinking it just seemed like a weird day. It just seemed weird. And I walked into work, and it seemed weird inside the store. And I walked into the break room, and there was like 8 or 9 people sitting at the break room table, which there's never that many people in the break room. And they're watching the TV, and I walked in, and I used to bring some lemonade that I drank, and I was putting it in the fridge, and I looked up at the screen, and there's a plane flying right into the World Trade Center. And my question to everybody is, what movie are you watching? And I mean, it was like 9 heads at once turned and looked at me like I was crazy. And they said, what? I said, what movie is this? They said, that's the World Trade Center from today. Like, what do you mean? They said, you didn't hear about the World Trade Center? I'm like, no, I just woke up. So it was definitely different for me because I found out like about 2:45 that afternoon, and it still was weird because I remember looking at it on the screen, and it absolutely looked like they were watching a movie. It wasn't anything that looked anywhere near real to me. So just tell me what you guys saw from being right there. Dave Weiss first, I guess.
So I saw it. I saw the second plane hit on television. When the second plane hit, I was actually about to leave my house to head to LaGuardia Airport. I was flying to Ohio that day. After the second plane hit, I realized my flight's probably canceled, and I wanted to go see this with my own eyes, not on television. So I watched. I'm down there. It was literally probably the clearest day, other than yesterday, since then, with the view of Manhattan. And of course, it wasn't tilted away, and you could see stuff that's way lower. That's a whole nother story. But I watched the buildings, and I don't want to say I watched them fall. I watched them turn to dust, and come down, and it was the weirdest thing ever. But there was people. There was probably a dozen people where I was, and they had 10-10 winds. The news station on out of New York. And immediately they said, the planes collapse, the buildings collapse, and they're just programming you, because when anything happens, no matter if it's a piece of paper that falls off a table or anything, we have to explain in our heads, figure out what caused that, and we go back to our collection of memories of everything we've ever seen, consciously or unconsciously, to come up with these explanations. So that we were highly programmed before this event, during this event, and after this event on what happened. And I'm very interested in allegedly Dave, because I've interviewed a lot of people on, like, did you see a plane? Where were you? And all of the people in Manhattan say, first they said, I saw the plane and I saw it hit the tower. But after you talk to them, they say, well, I heard a plane. I looked for it turning away from the towers. Then I looked back and I saw an explosion. And they all admit that they didn't see the plane, but they heard a plane and they saw the explosion. The only people that say they saw a plane were people that were across the river. And I think that's where Dave said he was. Dave?
Yeah, that's right. Well, a month before, in August, I'd actually turned down a job in Lehman Brothers on the 40th floor of Tower 1, so I had a bit of a lucky escape there. But I took a job directly across the water in Hoboken on the waterfront, and that day I'd gone into work as usual, and somebody came running in and said a plane has just hit the tower. So we all ran outside and onto the pier. So we're right out there, right on, as far out in the water as we could see, and we saw, the smoke coming out of the building. And later on, sure enough, I saw what looked like a plane flying very low over the Statue of Liberty from where I was standing. And it was literally maybe a few hundred feet above the Statue of Liberty. Came in low towards Manhattan, and it disappeared behind the building. So I didn't actually see it crash into the building, but then I saw the explosion. So as I said, it looked like a plane. I heard the sound of the engines. So at the time, I had no reason to believe it was anything other than a plane.
I believe. Just let me interject that the people, in Manhattan, I believe a plane flew by the towers. There is video of a plane that was passing the towers right after the explosion, and I believe that when you're in Manhattan, you would hear the plane, then see the explosion, and you wouldn't see the plane anymore. And the people from New Jersey would see this thing, whatever it was, plane, missile, whatever you want to call it, flying in, and as it passes the tower, your eye is going to go to the explosion. And you'll believe that it hit the tower, and I think that's what most people are seeing.
Well, we definitely saw a plane. It looked very much like a plane. As an airliner, not a missile.
Sure.
Whether it was a hologram or something, I don't know. But to me, at the time, it looked just like a plane. Now, Jaron, you said that you watching it on TV, it looked like a movie. Well, it felt like we were in a movie, because after the second tower fell, we were all standing around, and suddenly we heard jet engines in the air, really loud jet engines, and somebody shouted, "It's another one!" And then everybody started screaming and running. It felt like you're in a disaster movie. So yes.
Well, I do. I mean, me just my personal belief. I do think that it was some sort of a drone or something that I think they either CGI'd or something, what looked like a passenger jet over this drone, whatever. So maybe you saw a drone. I don't know. That's just my opinion because I think it would have been easier to have something to CGI over, and then also they could have built it very, aluminum like foil like drone that just kind of flew and did go kind of morph right into the building. But Bob, your opinion on that?
I'm sorry, I was typing and I had my microphone muted. Well, yeah, I mean, I had heard that several people had reported that they had seen a missile and that they were actually being launched from the roof of an adjacent building. But ever since we had Matrix Decode on last week, I started looking a lot more closely at Dr. Judy Wood's work. And, because of the fact that it flew directly in the face of what Simon from Clues Forum was saying. And the more that I look at that, I honestly have to agree that, there was some sort of very exotic weaponry in use at some level. Whether it was visible or not to the people on the ground, I don't know. But I think that it was used in conjunction possibly with drones, and the drones may have been made up to look like, some sort of airliner. But one thing's for certain, when you look at the TV footage of the jets as they approach the towers, and you slow those way down, you can see the wings kind of disappearing and reappearing, and it was clearly a video effect, that was brought in after the fact. And that combined with the fact that when the first tower was struck, the graphic actually showed the nose of the plane coming out the other side, which is just ridiculously impossible. And so their solution to that for the short term was to cover it over with a graphic. But yeah, I think drones were definitely used, and I think that there was some other type of weaponry for the demolition of the buildings used besides just thermate.
Yeah, I think if everyone, and I know you've mentioned it before, Bob, is that September Clues video is the best video you can watch to really see the media's impact in the whole thing and how each station must have had the graphics before. And I think that's the best video I've seen about 9/11. Totally.
I'd like to throw in a comment here. The Chopper 5 was of the plane coming through and coming out the other side that I believe Peter Jennings commented on it, saying you could see the plane come out the other side. And that was the photographer on that plane, the cameraman. I think his name was Cy Symington. If I have that wrong, mixed up, whatever. But the cameraman is the guy that wrote the Avid software system and teaches a course on how to use it. And if you don't know what that system is, it's a system that allows you to insert aircraft into live video. That's the guy that filmed that aircraft going into the building.
Coincidence.
That's just a coincidence.
That's crazy.
I mean, NASA should hire him.
Do you think the reason that it came out the other side was just because the helicopter drifted a little bit to the left and it?
Well, you're referring to there's a great video, and some people say this guy Ace Baker is a shill or whatever. I think he did a fantastic job showing how they layer it, how they get it in, and how the you have to put a mask so it goes behind the mask and doesn't come out. People should watch that. If you want to check out all of the videos on No Planes, just go to my website. It's deepinsidetherabbithole.com and go to the No Planes page. The other thing I wanted to say was about Dr. Judy Woods. She is as controversial as Flat Earth. And there's so many people out there destroying her, and there's also people that are supporting her, and both of those groups, a portion of both of those groups, or all of one, have not read her book. Even the people that are supporting her. I used to be a Dr. Judy Woods supporter before I read her book. Then I read her book, and now I'm a big supporter of hers. And here's the problem with her book. Her book is amazing. It's well printed, hardcover, beautiful paper, well laid out, easy to read. It's 500 pages with pictures and graphs, and nothing in that book has been debunked, has been taken apart. And until you read that book cover to cover, you really shouldn't comment on her work. And literally, I bought a dozen copies. I've given them to college professors, physics professors, and I pass them around to people. It is literally the most important book. Read it, and then make up your own mind. Don't trust me because I'm just a shill from New York.
Well,
You're just a man.
I'd just like to add the reason why I said that to me it looked like a plane, and I'm not ruling out that it could be holographics, because I don't know if anyone caught that what has to be a holographic test that a whole city appeared in a river in China. Did anyone catch
Yeah,
that?
we had actually shown it a few weeks back.
Yeah, we
okay.
did. Yeah.
Well, I mean that was obviously a test, was a large-scale test. So if they can do that, then there's no reason they couldn't have done that back in 2001.
Oh, I totally agree. And I will say that somebody in the comments last week said that supposedly was debunked as something other than what it appeared to be. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know. But I have long held that like many of the UFO sightings and the strange appearances that we see are actually holographic projections, and they are testing these things, on one scale or another. They also have the holographic sound that you guys may remember back in 2012, where a lot of people were hearing these really bizarre sounds from all around the world, and they were completely localized to one area. Nobody else could hear them. And
I've heard it in New York. I heard that in New York. They had a billboard on, I think it was 3rd Avenue, I can't remember, a billboard. You walk past and it sounded like somebody whispering at you.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
it's creepy.
Because I actually did a little research on that and found that the government actually patented this system nearly a decade ago, if not maybe a little over a decade ago, where they could beam an audio signal at a person's head, and you could have somebody standing right next to you, and you would hear it perfectly clear and even loud, but the person next to you couldn't hear a thing. And that technology is actually patented by the U.S. government.
They actually had that in a grocery store where I live, where they were targeting advertisements at you. I think they were just testing it out. This was a bunch of years ago, where you hear this voice and you assume everyone else could hear it, but nobody else can hear it that's like a foot away from you.
Yeah, it's crazy how good they've gotten the technology. So I think, between the holographic audio and the holographic video of the UFOs and, Mary appearing in South America, over mountains, I think they're just doing little tests like this. And who knows, maybe Werner von Braun was right when he told Dr. Carol Rosen that, they're going to try this fake alien invasion card. But they certainly have the technology for the holographics, that's for sure.
I almost think personally that they missed the boat on that. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll have to wait and see. But I think even they realize now they might have gotten away with that 10 years ago. I just think it would be too tough for them to do at this point. But
you
we'll
mean
have
the
to
fake
wait and see.
alien invasion?
Yeah, I think a fake alien invasion. I think that I just think people would not fall for it. Maybe I'm too much in the truther, quote-unquote, truther community.
That's exactly right, Jared. I mean, you've heard about it over and over and over again, but the average person is completely oblivious to it.
But I think that's why the flat Earth came up when it did. I mean, I don't think it was an accident that it popped up and is now exploding, because I think it's the answer to this fake alien invasion. If you know that the Earth is flat and there's no space, then how can there be aliens?
Yeah, I think the same exact thing. I think the whole time they have had to keep the flat Earth off people's mind. So when you have the Apollo missions, that worked well for 30 years, and then at the end of that, when people started to kind of really talk about this moon hoax and things like that, and it really started to get a little bit deeper, with the movie coming out, on Fox and some of what's his name, Bart Seibel, or Seibel, whatever his name is first.
Yeah,
name.
Bart Seibel, who did
Yeah.
The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon and Astronauts Gone Wild.
Right. When those things started to come out and some of the proof that he clearly shows as far as the window and then the bright Earth behind him, I think at that point that was kind of their chance to get the alien invasion thing out there, and they missed their their opportunity, I think. And now that the flat Earth has kind of come out, they would have to do it pretty quick because, like you said, once people start catching wind of that, I don't know if they'll buy the whole alien thing anymore. So,
You know
No, I
what?
think
Good, Dave.
I was going to say that I don't think they missed a window. Well, they might have missed a window, but I think the plan had to have this come later because they haven't got everything else in place yet. You know, they need all countries to be essentially financially destitute. You know, all at the same time. They need essentially everybody to be on a moneyless, you know, mark of the beast system. And then they can bring out the fake alien invasion card.
Jaron, if you think it's too late, just go to the mall or the supermarket and watch the people and listen to what they're talking about. It's not too late. People
they're just
are
sleeping.
they're so asleep. It's shocking. I just sit there with my jaw open watching people and listening to them, and I'm like, it's amazing. I go to the gym I go to, just the sports talk and everything that's important, and I'm just like, wow, nobody is awake.
You know, it's funny, Dave, that you say that because one of the TV shows that I really liked, it was on a couple years ago, was called Mind Control with Darren Brown. And one of the examples that he used and one of the demonstrations he did was he was talking about how shopping malls are made, you know, entirely with, you know, subliminal messaging in mind to get people to buy and just kind of put them in this trance. And so he would make announcements about every 5-10 minutes that just sounded like, you know, advertisements, except he would use he would change his words up just ever so slightly. And then the last announcement he made, he said, "Oh, well, there's a sale going on the second floor at this store, and you want to go there right now." And as soon as he said "now," everybody in the mall raised their right hand, and then they started looking at each other, going, "WTF? Why did we just do that?" So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more about them all walking around in a trance.
Hey, before we completely get off of 9/11, I just wanted to make another comment. There's a lot of different theories. There's a lot of stuff we've figured out about 9/11. I think Dr. Woods figured out more than anybody, and I highly recommend people getting her book, Where Did the Towers Go? But the one thing we know absolutely positively for sure is that the official story is worse than anything NASA even says. I mean, you know, the ground liquefied in Pennsylvania swallowed the plane so deep that the people and the parts couldn't be recovered, you know. Meanwhile, they'll dig 2 miles for a buried Chilean coal worker for a month. And, you know, the story of how it cut into the towers, but the wings folded into the fuselage to go into the Pentagon. There's a lot of things. A lot of people, a lot of the names that were in the 3,000 have no social security number, so they're not real people. And I think the number of people that died is far, far less than what they're saying. With that said,
I agree.
With that said, there are groups out there that are very hardcore. They're saying not a single person died. You know, that's not the case. I believe that there are dead people. Did I see any dead people? No. So I had 2 friends. Both worked for Cantor Fitzgerald, which is the firm on the top that I believe was highly somehow financially involved in what happened on 9/11. These 2 friends are gone, right? I know their families, and their families sure seem like their sons and brothers have died, and they're gone, but I can't prove that they're dead. They're gone. They disappeared on 9/11. They're either dead or they're not, but they're gone. And there's people that accuse me of being a shill because I say I knew 2 people. And I will grant you this, that I've never gone until recently to their memorial pages. The pictures of them are horrible. I mean, they don't even look like real people. Their head looks too big, but they're back then, you know, they were regular pictures in a frame that were taken a picture with a camera, you know, rather than even a scanner, and uploaded to the internet.
Yeah, did you see the Clues Forum expose on that by any chance?
Oh yeah, look, I'm all over it. They destroyed me, calling me a shill. They really embarrassed themselves. They do such good work, but they're so close-minded that anybody possibly died. that they just shut off logical thinking. I mean, you can't. People die in simple exercises, let alone if this was just an exercise, which it was of some sort. Um, things happen. I don't. I believe that the original plan that nobody was supposed to die on 9/11, but I think something went wrong. I believe Flight 93 was supposed to hit Building 7, but something went wrong with the fakery. They had to, quickly come up with the Pennsylvania crash, and they still had to drop Building 7 to make this whole thing go down, for multiple purposes that there were. But people are gone.
Yeah,
And,
that was really strange about Building 7 because I mean Giuliani had just refitted it, right? He had it rebuilt and fortified because the CIA, the FBI, all those other agencies were in there, of course, that were doing investigations on the announcement that was made on September 10th, and that was all conveniently destroyed. But I was just thinking, how can you have a fortified building that was just recently redone to that collapse for no apparent reason? That was
no, it collapsed due to office furniture fires. That's the official story.
Yeah,
the official story. People that believe the 9/11 story don't even know the official story. The official story is so ridiculous. It's not even funny in any way, shape, or form. But people just, I didn't know that, and then they still don't wake up.
Well,
you're crazy if you don't believe in the scientific explanation, the mainstream explanation, which they don't even know what that is. They just know they don't want to be considered crazy, so they just go along with whatever it is. I mean, you can just look at the pictures of the damn Pentagon, and I say it all the time. It's a way for me to judge people by just asking them if they think a plane hit the Pentagon, and if they just look at me and say, of course, yeah, plane. At that point, I don't even want to carry on any kind of conversation because they obviously have never even thought to look into it. There couldn't be anything more cut and dry, in my opinion.
Did anyone see the film? It was about 20 seconds of film that surfaced just recently from the backside of Building 7.
No.
No, me neither.
No. This is pretty amazing. I'll have to post it. It's literally you can see the windows being blown out. Just minutes before the whole thing fell. So it's obvious. It was obviously rigged.
Dave, I'm not sure of which video you're talking about, but there was one, and I think it was the backside that somebody just reversed the image of the front side and even wrote in it, "This is a hoax." I'm not sure if that's the one you're talking about, but
I know this wasn't the hoax one because
okay.
I used to work down there. I know what the backside of
awesome.
the film looks like.
Love to see it.
Hey, Dave, allegedly, Dave, you said you used to work around there, or have you ever been into the World Trade Center?
Yeah, as I said, I used to go to the PATH station underneath the World Trade Center every morning, and as I said, a month before, I'd been interviewed a couple of times to go to Lehman Brothers on the 40th floor.
Now, did you go to the 40th floor?
Yeah.
So you went into the 40th floor. There was a 40th floor there and everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
And was it fully? Was the whole floor full of people, desks, in order?
Sure. It was Lehman Brothers. It was like buzzing.
So there's a lot of people that say that the buildings were completely empty, the floors were stripped, and there was nothing inside to prepare for the demolition. I don't believe that because I was in the building 2 weeks before 9/11 on the 17th floor and I think the 4th floor with the New York Institute of Finance, which I did work with, and there was people everywhere, big, huge office cubicles, wall to wall.
Well, I've seen the elevator that is for the tourist elevator, or when you're doing and that stops at floor 71 and then begins again at 101. And I thought that was interesting because somebody had said something about, if the 101 and up was actually really full floors, and then there was nothing from 100 to 71, and then I had heard that there was also nothing from, I think it's 23 or 24 to around that 71. So, but Dave being on 40, nips that in the bud real quick. But I did.
And Also, I've been up to Windows on the World a few times as well, which was right at the top.
Right, and that's what I mean when I had somebody say that they had been in there before, and when they walked in, there was, and I've never been there, so you'd have to tell me if this is true, but as you walk into the building, there's like ushers there, and they would ask you if you wanted a tour, and if you said yes, then they take you to the tour elevator, and that elevator would take off and go straight up to 71. And then 71 would be like a nice full floor. It had desks, it had plants, and people could walk around up there. And then from there, they would take you up to Windows of the World, which is the top, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just what somebody had said, kind of backing up the story of possibly the rest of the floors. Not the rest, but it was just something that would make sense to me that if you had, nothing in between 71 and 100, and then the plane supposedly hits around 71, 72, and they just knew that would bring the top down. There's nothing there for it to fall onto, so it just goes straight down. But if you have a 40th floor, that defeats that whole idea.
Well, I mean, they could have 90% of the floors completely empty, locked off to any elevator traffic, and nobody would ever know.
That was the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah.
And they said everybody went to work there, right? Like everybody went underneath there, so it's just a very busy place all the time, right? Because to get to any of the buildings, you had to go underneath.
Oh yeah, I mean, to one of the only ways to get into Manhattan, if you weren't driving there, is the PATH train, which stops right underneath. I think it's Tower 2. So yeah, that was always buzzing. That station.
Have any of you guys heard of Rebecca Roth? I just heard an interview that was done, I think it was last week. I never heard of her before.
Yeah, I've heard all of her interviews. She's very interesting, and also I have some concerns about some of the things that she says.
Sum it up for us real quick, just so I don't know anything about her.
She wrote a book called Methodical Illusion, basically spelling out what happened on 9/11 from a flight attendant point of view, how so many protocols were broken, and she throws out 99% facts. But one of the things she throws out, she said that she was writing a book not about 9/11, and she was searching. She was searching for some information, and she came across an article. I can't remember exactly what it said, on how about some future false flag, and involving Israel, and God, I wish I could remember what it is exactly. But there's no proof that article ever exists anywhere, and she always brings it up. But everything else that she says about 9/11 is very interesting, although she does say it like fact, but it's just speculation, saying that the planes never crashed, they were landed at a military base, and she figured out what military base they landed at, and that all the passengers were gassed, and then their dead bodies were carted away. She has no proof of that whatsoever. Yeah. That's just speculation. I don't believe that anyone on any of those planes died. There's 36 flights from the East Coast, from those airports to the West Coast early in the morning, because they're very desirable flights during a weekday, because you get there at like 10 o'clock in the morning, and you can get a full day of work in. Those flights are almost always, without exception, sold out, standing room only. Well, on 9/11, 34 of them, or whatever the number was, were sold out with people on standby, but the 4 that were hijacked were only like 20 or 30% full. How is that even possible? And Flight 11 and Flight 175 weren't even scheduled to fly that day, so if they did, how did they get passengers? And many of the names on those manifests, of fake names, or I don't think there was people on those planes, were tied back to have Pentagon connections.
Yeah. Do you think that she might have been talking about the Israelis that were arrested, and then they were in Israel supposedly on a talk show, and they were saying that the reason they were there was to actually document the event? Is that what you're talking about?
No, she talks about that. I just, my mind's a little fried right now. It'll come
she
to
talks
me.
about that, but she also talks about the art students that had rented out, I think it was floor number 91.
Jello or something they called her.
The gelatin, the bee thing. So she wrote a new book, so she's out doing interviews. So I don't want to say she's doing interviews again, because I've never heard of her before. This is the first time.
She's done a lot of interviews. Yeah, she has her radio show weekly. It's on the internet somewhere. Just look it up. She's interesting. You know, she's waking up a lot of people to 9/11, but I just hold her at arm's length.
Yeah, I always just go back to that thing. I think that there's so many stories, and some of them are just disinfo, just so people wander in circles and, you know, can never really get to the bottom of it 100%. But to me, I think that the buildings were built to go down, possibly because bringing it to a flat Earth thing, it appears to me that on the top of all these buildings, look at the Eiffel Tower. In fact, if you look at the top of churches and the crosses at the top of churches, a lot of these things are hidden satellites and or hidden antennas. And I think on the flat Earth that the higher you go, the further your antenna reaches. And so I think that they knew in building both the World Trade Centers that eventually they would want to bring them down and build higher. And if you've never seen it yet, I recommend you go to a site called Gigapan, GIGAPAN .com. Right when you go to that site, the very first thing that pops up is a 360-degree photo taken from the top of the current One World Trade Center. And you can actually, you know, look down as you start 360 degrees. So you just start folding it over and look down. When you see this mast that they have on top of the World Trade Center now, it is unbelievable. And I just think there's a lot more going into that than we would ever even imagine. And again, if they just ever needed to rebuild a new antenna or something like that, all that would have to come out of their own pockets, or somebody would have to pay for it. But when it's an act of terrorism, of course it comes out of taxpayer money. You rebuild the buildings with taxpayer money, and now you've got yourself the new tallest mast, which, for the record, if I'm not mistaken, is 1,776 feet tall. So
Correct.
They love that number, 1776, don't they?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You said that you think the towers were built, you know, with the design to collapse. They were planned. There's evidence that they were planned for this before they were built. There was another building that was supposed to go there. It was all set. Rockefeller stepped in, built this thing. His office had the best view right down, looking at the towers. You know, his office had literally the best seats in the entire New York stadium for the 9/11 show. And then I don't know if some of you have seen it. The correlation between Washington Square Park Arch, which is that famous arch that frames out the towers perfectly, and the U.S. money, where they changed all of the dollar bills, not just the $1 bill, the 5, 10, 50, 20, and 100, where they changed the artwork ever so slightly on some of them. So when you fold them in the shape of an airplane, that it shows all of the different stages of 9/11, the Pentagon burning, the towers hit, the towers collapsing.
Oh, I've seen that. That's crazy.
Yeah, and in the end, hold on, I'll tell you guys where the video is that you need to watch. It's a short video, but and in the end, the last one was the fountain shooting up in the middle of the arch. And that's supposed to be a blood, the symbol of blood, the blood coming out of the fountain. But the Washington Square Park, the fountain, they spent, I think, $18 million renovating the park, moving the fountain because it was like off to the side. Well, they only moved it. Yeah, yep. But they didn't put it in the center where it would have made sense. They lined it up perfectly with the arch and the towers. And it's 9/11 was a blood satanic sacrifice ritual with the purpose of stealing our consciousness and stopping our critical thinking skills. And it worked. It really worked. So there's a video by a YouTuber called Betsy Lee McGee, and you could just search YouTube for Rockefeller's 9/11 money, and she has it in 2 parts, and it's mind-blowing. You can watch it a dozen times, and your jaw will drop every time.
Yeah, you know, Dave, I think you're right about it. It was designed to completely rob us of our, abilities like that. But on the other hand, I think it woke a lot of people up too. And it kind of started a cascade effect, I think in an opposite direction of what they were intending as well.
Sure. Woke me up.
Yeah, ditto.
Yeah, I would say it's the first thing that got me going. I remember a buddy of mine telling me in probably 2005 that it was a inside job, and I remember, you are crazy. I'm not talking to you anymore. And sure enough, you start looking into it, and before you know it, you're just as insane as the rest of them, right? So that is definitely interesting. But yeah, I do think they were meant to come down. And now they've got this huge monstrosity up there, and I think that it's just got a much more powerful radio antenna. And I don't know if you guys have seen the pictures, but there's already the same pictures with the sun setting behind it. Again, the building looks empty at the top. I'd say top 33% of the building looks completely empty. So don't be surprised if this one ever goes down too in the next few years.
Also, the symbolism of 9/11, the two towers, which are the pillars that you see next to all of the Masonic temples, and if you look at statues of Baphomet, they always have the two pillars, and it's the taking down of the pillars and combining them into one. And what's the name of the new building that looks like two towers twisted together? One World Trade.
Yeah, I thought they were supposed to represent like Jachin and Boaz.
And they represent so many things. If you look at the bottom is the same box. I forget what they call it in Mecca. It's lined up with Mecca. It's literally
and they've got the top is like a, what do they call those things? A sire or the same thing that's the top of mosques. It's got the three. I can't think of the name of it.
Check out Mark Gray on Facebook. Follow his page. He deciphers all of this numerology and stuff. Also, Flight 11 hit Building 1, and Flight 175 hit the other building. Add those numbers together, divide by 2. It's 93, which is a Masonic number. And Flight 93 was supposed to hit Building 7. And Mark Passio really does a great piece on that. Although when he did that piece, he believed that there was planes. I believe he knows now that there weren't.
Is that the same Mark Gray that does a lot of work with William Henry?
I'm not sure. He puts together amazing, esoteric correlations, numerology, and he knows all of it. Yeah, he's amazing. Mark Gray on Facebook. He's great. I discovered him. He did an interview on Red Ice Radio, which is a great podcast, and it blew me away with how he tied all the 9/11 stuff to everything.
Yeah, he is truly amazing. I saw some of his work for the first time when I did a seminar with William Henry, and Mark Gray pointed out. In fact, he was there at that seminar, and the stuff that he pointed out was absolutely mind-boggling. So he's got quite an eye. He really does.
And just to everybody listening, one of my viewers emailed me and I thought gave me a tremendous idea, something we're not doing that I'm going to do starting tonight. Within 30 minutes or so of the show ending, I will have every link that we talked about in the description. So it's just something that somebody had mentioned, that it was hard to always go back and listen to the show and try and follow where we were when we're talking about links. So as we're talking, I'm writing these all down, and I will put those links in the description for you to make it easy. And the other thing to me I just wanted to mention about 9/11 before we close that book for now, I believe people can misspeak all the time. I know how easy that is, but to me one of the biggest clues is George Bush, when they ask him what he remembers from when he saw the buildings, and he goes into the story about him sitting in the hallway and watching the first building get hit. And just if it was just that alone, you would say, well, maybe he meant the second building. But then he goes into a story about how he thought about, wow, that must be a really bad pilot to fly into that building. He must be having a terrible flying day. You can't just say that stuff on accident. Like he was either watching it on film, like in a truck or somewhere, and just forgot that he wasn't supposed to mention that. Have you guys heard that? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge one.
Yeah, but let's not forget about he was also reading My Pet Goat upside down when that happened.
Yeah, planes must hit steel. They were chanting. They had all these children chanting, planes must hit steel.
Unbelievable. I couldn't believe that when I saw that.
You know what? You might want to check that. I actually remember a year ago or so I looked into that. That's not the words in the book. it's they're fooling you by saying those words. It's actually
But
different words.
don't you hear the kids
Oh,
saying that?
you
Yeah,
can
no,
hear
they're
it, but I
actually
mean,
saying it. They are, yes, but it's not what's in the book, is what he's saying.
Sure,
right.
but they're chanting "planes must hit
Certainly,
steel."
yeah, it does
Yeah.
sound like that.
Crazy.
It
That's
is crazy.
crazy. Another big thing that a lot of people forget is in the day or two following 9/11, when they were interviewing Bush and Condoleezza Rice, they both said multiple times in separate interviews that, when the reporter said, "How could you let this happen?" and they said, "We could never have imagined that terrorists would use planes like missiles." Meanwhile, on
They're having
9/11, a minimum of 4 different exercises of planes being hijacked and crashing into buildings, including the World Trade Towers.
insane.
I mean, they're laughing at us. They're laughing at us.
Yeah, absolutely crazy.
I wanted to bring something up as well about the classroom. There was I believe it was George Bush. I came across a video a long time ago, and he talked about how he was in one of the classrooms, and they had a TV set up so that way he could watch the airplane crash into the building. Now, you might think that, well, he watched the second airplane crash into the building, but the problem is that he was in the classroom, from what we're told, when the second airplane crashed into the building. So how was he in the classroom watching the airplane crash into the building if the second one hit while he was with the children reading the book? I don't know if you guys ever saw that
Yeah,
video.
he saw the first one, and is repeating that. And so I don't know if he was, like I said, they must have had a camera on it, and he was watching it in the car or something, and years later would forget that and just say, "I remember seeing that first one hit."
Because there was no footage of that.
The only
Right.
footage came out a few days afterwards, with the Norday brothers footage.
The one
Yeah,
from
which was-
down below, right?
Which
The guy who was doing the
blatantly
documentary.
fake.
Oh yeah, that was terrible.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things that I
Now-
think are clear indicators.
I was just going to say that I don't think they're laughing at us as such. I think there's a rule in this universe that in order to do things like this, they need to get our consent for it. They need to put it out there, and if we say nothing about it, then we consent. There's a maxim in law that says, he who is silent consents. So they put this stuff out there, and if we don't pick up on it and we don't say anything about it, then they have our consent and they go ahead.
Right. It's like the law of free will. And, also it's the same works with like executive orders. It's like, if the president issues an executive order, unless somebody in the Senate or Congress, disputes it, it is automatically is assumed to go into law and be law after that.
That all ties together with, our thoughts create our reality, and maybe the people that are running things don't have the ability to create the reality that they want, so
You just
they
said it,
trick
man. That's
us
it.
into doing it. They wanted to invade Afghanistan and Syria and Libya and Sudan and Iraq and everything, but they couldn't do it until we banged the war drum. So they pulled this off, and everyone is going rah rah rah, let's go, and boom, that they got the keys to the jets and the missiles. They can do it without us, but they can't until we give them permission.
Right. It's kind of like when Roosevelt, wanted to get the United States in World War II. And, the American public didn't want to have anything to do with it. So basically he started imposing all these illegal sanctions against Japan, doing everything he could do to possibly provoke that. And then when that happened, of course, then, people were starting to enlist. It's just mental manipulation.
Well, I wrote a blog post about this a while back about the film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Do you guys know about that film?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah,
Love it.
Well, the interesting thing about that film is that do you remember there's a very, very dark character in that film. He was a child catcher. Okay.
Right.
Now, Now, there wasn't a child catcher in the original book by Ian Fleming, by the way. So there wasn't a child catcher. That was something Disney put in there. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Now that the child catcher stealing the 2 blonde-haired, blue-eyed kids, was essentially our consent to the state taking children. And everybody liked the film, they loved the film, they gave their consent. And then straight after that, the child stealing by the state just skyrocketed. So, you know, this is how it works. They'll put this stuff out there, wait for our consent. If they get it, then off they go.
And the way they get away with all of this is the fact that we don't believe any of this is real, and they do.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
That is absolutely true. And I think what you said, Dave, was so perfect when you said they can't create anything. It's almost as if they're a different breed that just does not have the creative spirit. They can't even mentally think of things that they want, so they need us to do it for them.
Right. There's a law
Correct.
of free will. There's a law of free will, basically, that cannot be. You cannot impose your will on somebody else's. You basically have to get their consent. Now, if you get their consent by tricking them, that doesn't seem to matter. All that matters is that you get their consent and you get their energy behind it.
I was just going to say that you're actually right, Jaron. They are a different breed to us. That is, I think I mentioned before that while I was researching the biggest lie of all, I discovered an even bigger lie, and I'm at the moment putting all this stuff together. But yes, they are a different breed altogether.
Yeah, that's definitely a highly plausible suggestion. I have never seen anything that tells me that they're not. There's definitely, I always look at it and say, how do these people do that? How could you? I have a video that I'm done with. I just haven't posted yet, but it's 2 hours of Buzz Aldrin being drunk at different venues and just talking, and the guy's out of his mind. But I always look at him like, how does he just keep getting up there and lying? And the more I think about it, it's just, he's just a different kind of person. It's just, lying to him is not like you or I that might get that stomach ache or, you know, might feel rotten for doing it, because he can just keep doing it. And like I've said before, excuse me, in his book, Amazing Desolation, or Unbelievable, whatever that thing's called, he talks about the fact that his mother committed suicide less than a year before he went to the moon, and that they just told the doctor, hey, make sure you lie about her cause of death. And he just, the way he's describing it is like, you know, believe me that we went to the moon. Oh, by the way, my mom committed suicide a year before, and we told the doctor to make sure he lied about her cause of death because we didn't want it to conflict with me going to the moon. And it's like, it just shocks me to the point where I don't know how people can just operate their lives like that. If my mom committed suicide, and I guess the reason he even says is because she didn't like the idea of the press and everything that he would be getting, and this is something she talked to him about, and he basically told her, too bad, I'm going. She commits suicide, and so just interesting. I think they're a different breed altogether. They don't think like we do.
I wouldn't put him as the different breed. I'd put him as essentially one of us who's actually essentially sold his soul. You know, in order to get to a position like he got, he's already compromised himself. So he can't not lie. He's got to do as he's told. Everybody in the public eye has compromised themselves in some way. It's not just Jimmy Savile and all the paedophiles that are being outed now. It's every single one of them. They have to be in a position where they can be taken out at a moment's notice. So if they say the wrong word, all of a sudden a scandal emerges and they're out of there.
Okay, Dave, you kind of piqued my curiosity. I have to ask you this. When you say they're a different breed, are you kind of insinuating something along the lines of what maybe Credo Mutwa or David Icke are talking about, that kind of breed?
No, I'm not.
Okay, all right.
You're talking about more son of Satan?
That stuff.
Are you talking more like son of Satan?
Breed.
Reptiles.
No, I'm talking. Well, there is as far as I'm concerned, there is a reptilian aspect to it, but that's essentially what Jaron just said, the seed of Satan. And you know, I can't believe I'm saying stuff like this because I've always been an atheist, but you it goes back to the Bible, and it's not the Roman Catholic Bible, but the King James 1611 and the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Apocrypha and the Testament of Solomon. If you put all those ancient books together, you get a complete and utter picture of not only the past but the present and the future. It's as if it was written by something that was above space and time. And that's who I think we are dealing with. We're dealing with beings that are above space and time at one level, and then at this level, the flesh and blood human level, we're dealing with people who are allied to one of the players, and another people who are allied to the other side. So,
Agreed.
when I was sort of in the conspiracy world, I was looking at all these conspiracies and looking at the pyramid of control, and you can only go so far up the pyramid, and trace it to humans. And when you ask who's at the top of the pyramid, at the time when I was in that mode, the only thing I could say was it had to be something that wasn't necessarily human, but also wasn't affected by time as we know it. And I put it down at the time to some kind of alien or some reptile or whatever. But now, and this is going to be unpopular, now I know it's this being that we've called Satan, and it's real and it's happening right now.
Well, I can't disagree with that. I've often said that, when you look at the level of deceit that's going on around the world and how unbelievably perfectly orchestrated it is, I've always believed that if there was such a being as Satan, that this would be something that, you would attribute to this character of having these abilities, because it's just beyond anything I think any one man or even group of men could conceive of. It just seems to go beyond that.
Yeah, and you've heard me say it a million times, same thing, that
Yep.
I really do think that it wouldn't make sense for humans to plan things so far ahead when you only have a 100-year lifespan. And in order to do what they've done, things seem to be planned a few hundred years, maybe 200 or 300 years in advance. And that's how they always are so far ahead of where we are or where we're at, and seems like certain things are released like at a certain time. There's a lot of things I don't think human beings would have discovered when they did. It just seems like they were let go at that time, like that was the time they wanted it to come out. So I see the same thing.
Has anybody seen the film Contact?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Right. Well, but in that film, there's obviously they get the plans for this machine, the biggest, most expensive machine in history, and there's a general or something that comes up and says, well, what if they send these plans to a budding civilization, and the poor saps build it, and out comes a Vegan army? Yeah. Well, that's exactly what's happened.
CERN?
Yes, CERN. But if you step back from that, what you get is, if you think about it, we've had technology for just over 100 years. 100 odd years ago, 2 long lifetimes ago, we were all going around in horse and carts. Yeah. So our technology isn't ours. It was given to us. And again, you can go back into the Bible and find out that. Oh, I've got thunder here. You can find out that it's the fallen angels started giving man technology. Taught us how to make weapons, taught us money, gave us money, gave us all these things. So what if all our technology that we think is ours has been given to us sort of piecemeal, until we get to the point where we can build the machine for them? And that's what CERN is, I believe. And the frightening thing is that again, when you look at the Book of Revelations, it actually says that in the last days that a key will be turned, and the bottomless pit. Oh, more thunder!
Unbelievable.
Right on cue, right on cue.
Who are you pissing off there, Dave?
Keep going,
I
keep
know,
going,
I know.
keep going, keep going.
I've got to go quick before I get struck by lightning. Yeah, a key will be turned, and the bottomless pit will open up, and Apollyon, or Abaddon in Hebrew, will come out, and with all the demons and the fallen angels. Well, guess where CERN is positioned? It's positioned on top of a town which was known as the Temple of Apollyon.
Oh, unbelievable! I didn't know that.
And when tomorrow, and this is, I'm trying not to be alarmist, but tomorrow is when they switch on CERN at the highest energy levels ever it's ever been at. I think it's 14 trillion electron volts is going to go through that machine, and it's going to, and they say it themselves, it's going to rip a hole in the fabric of space-time and open up a hole into another dimension. Which
it'll be fine, Dave. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. That'll be fine.
It'll be fine. Come on.
So I'm just saying it's I'm not trying to be alarmist or anything, but there is prophecy here, and contact, I think, is the consent form as such.
Wow.
Everybody's speechless.
Yeah, we are. We're speechless.
Letting the thunder talk.
I'm letting the thunder talk for you. That's amazing.
Hey, I got a question. We're spread all over the country, and Dave, are you the only one out of the country in this group?
Yeah, we're all here.
How are the chemtrails in the last day or two, especially today, where you guys are, Jaron?
They were. It's been pretty clear, actually, 2 days in a row.
Okay.
Very clear.
Yeah, we had a clear span, but we are so socked in right now. I can't even see the moon. It's so thick, and I'm just wondering if this has anything to do with the eclipse that's coming up, or I don't know.
I wondered the same thing, to be honest with you. Here in Denver, the sky was actually very clear today. I was amazed. We didn't have a ton of chemtrails like we typically do.
Yeah, I would say the same thing for the last 2 days. Missa was out taking pictures yesterday, and it was extremely clear. So I don't know. I saw that video Dave Johnson put out about the fires going on in California and how that's going to leave a red tint up in this. It didn't make any sense to me, because then the moon would be red now, which it is not. So
Right.
So anyway, well, just to close out on the other part that allegedly Dave was talking about, again, I get to a kind of a dead end as I research trying to figure out this whole time thing that's in my head. But it's basically the same thing that allegedly Dave said, that to me it just simply does not make sense that all this technology came about in the last 100 years. And not saying that the 100 years before that didn't exist or whatever, but it wouldn't surprise me if we found out that we've only been here for 1,000 years, and that a lot of this time has simply been fabricated. It's been made up. It wouldn't be too hard to make things up. In fact, if you've ever done, again, I run a bookstore, and I've done a lot of studies into literature and how they go about dating that stuff. It's an absolute joke. They basically can take a book that they find, and they will just match the writing style and say, oh, the writing style tells us this book is negative 100 BC, and things like that. It's just a joke that, and a lot of the things, if you start reading some of the stuff we have up on our site, read some books written in 100 and 300 and 500, and read some books in 200 BC, and they are spelling out the way the universe works in today's scientific terms. So either those books were written around 16 or 1700 when they came up with these ideas, or human beings were completely stupid, and it's funny that they call it the Dark Ages. Between 400 and 1600, nothing happened. I mean, I think it's hilarious if you look up, somebody go look up the constellations that we have, and it will, on Wikipedia, it'll list all the constellations, and it will tell you the year that they were found. And all the constellations were found by Ptolemy in 300 BC, and then all the ones were found in 1650. So there is no discoveries, there's no inventions there, and of course they had to put a few. I'm not saying that there's none, but whether or not those are really invented now, how would any of us know? It's simply just ascribed a time, and we all believe it. And I think if you get into the mode that I'm in, where I'm not really into believing anything until I see it, it's hard to prove further back than your own lifespan, to be honest. Maybe your grandparents, but before that, you start to run into some walls. But I don't know if you guys have ever seen anything like that.
I would agree, because that's part of the research I'm doing at the moment. The Dark Ages weren't called the Dark Ages because nothing happened. The Dark Ages were called that because it was 1,000 years of black rule, essentially, in Europe. But after they were conquered and driven out, then the Renaissance happened, which meant let's destroy all the art and replace it with different art. And any of the figures that were around in that age who are actually black, well, let's repaint them as white. So
Jesus Christ.
Well, him too.
But I mean, even some of those old paintings that have the UFOs that everybody just glosses over and says, oh yeah, they drew UFOs back then. They didn't even have an idea about flight. If flight didn't come around till 1900, how are people in 15 and 1600 drawing saucers on their paintings? It's because they were drawn recently, or at least they knew what would be coming. Those things are just really interesting to look into. And also, I've said it a million times, and you guys can go research this all you want. I've tried. It gets very, very interesting that they tell you that books were written in certain years. They'll say this book was written in 100 AD. This book was written in 400, 500, 600. How did they know that if we didn't ascribe time until 1600? Meaning, we call the year 0 when Jesus was born, but that was added in 1600. So where is the chronological time before that? How would you know? Somebody must have wrote in that book when they wrote it in 400 AD what the hell the year was. Well, guess what? The book now says 400 AD. Well, that didn't come around until 1600. So how would the person who wrote that book have known that the year would be 400 AD? And there is no books from 400 AD. I mean, look that up. They're all rewrites, and they're all, most books were written, and they'll even admit it, in 1500, 1600, but they'll say they were rewritten or copied from earlier manuscripts. It's all made up.
What about dates like the Council of Nicaea that supposedly took place in 325 AD, and other historical events, the Magna Carta? How are they dating those?
Well, exactly. What date did it actually take place? Because we now know, now that we've ascribed the year 0 to Jesus' birth, we now know that that was 325. But what did they call it then? Well, if you look at that old paperwork...
Hey, Jaron, his birth supposedly was not at 0.
I know that. It was like at 3, right? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, what I'm saying, in fact, I mean, if you listen to Mark Sargent's interview with, what's the guy's name, the Christian that was on Mark's show?
Rob Skiba.
Yeah, Skiba.
Yeah.
He does an excellent job of saying that Jesus' birth and has actual astronomical lineup for it and everything was on 9/11. And it really gets interesting when you hear that. And then you start to kind of understand why they will show you lots of places where 9/11 showed up in older literature or old movies or Back to the Future and these things that people attribute to 9/11, the 9/11 that we see the buildings fall. But could it have been just a date that is used going back a ways? So very interesting. But I know what you're saying, Bob, and do you see what I'm saying? I try to explain it to some people and they don't understand, but do you get, like, why wouldn't we have paperwork from the Council of Nicaea saying what year it took place? How would it say 325?
No, I understand that. I just, I'm asking the same thing. They certainly, you would think they had some sort of methodology of dating that at least was understood during the day, but I don't know what that is.
Yeah, neither do I. Even the Bible, if you read the Bible, it never says really any year. It will just say in the 5th month of such and such, or 5th day of such and such month during the reign of so and so, right? Like, they didn't have any kind of chronological system of time then that we would be able to reference now. So it certainly looks to me as if, when you talk about the King James Bible written in 1600, it's entirely possible, in my opinion, that the entirety of the Bible was written in 1600. You can call me crazy all you want. It's just there's no reason for me to accept anything earlier than that when I can find no proof that I think should be there. As in, when one of the books I love to read is Cosmos Entopolitis, or whatever his name is. He wrote Christian Topography. I believe the year is 587, and I've always found that book for years as being captivating, that he was able to write like that in that year. Well, when I started to get an idea of this, I said, wait a second, I've read a book that I know was written in 500. Well, I went back and really tried to find what did he say the year was when it was written, and there is no information on that. It's simply something that was copied again in the year 1650 that they say was copied from earlier manuscripts, and I guess we're supposed to believe that because we changed the dates that they just would have dropped the dates out of the books when they rewrote them and changed the dates to our new time system. Dave Weiss, you ever seen anything like that?
I was just going to comment saying, what about, Dave, allegedly Dave, I believe, talks about this, that we are, everything is energy. We are energetic beings. Everything, there's no matter. Who's the scientist that said whatever matter is, it certainly isn't matter? That we live in a simulation, and perhaps CERN or something like CERN does a reset and changes the history.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I think it's called, the thing with the Bernstein Bears and the Bernstein Bears?
The Mandela effect.
The Mandela effect. And perhaps, and the Tower of Babel, the whole story where everything changes, and will we notice? And maybe, coming up on this blood moon or tomorrow when CERN fires up, maybe we'll just be telling a different story after that. Who knows?
Yeah, it's trippy to think about, and that Mandela effect was really screwing with me for a little while. Still kind of is with some of the latest ones that came out. Like if the Star Wars line that says, blank, I am your father. Bob, what is that line?
Luke, I am your father.
Right. Go look it up. It's not that anymore. Now it's, no, I am your father. There is no Luke, I am your father. That's gone. And Procter and Gamble is now spelled Procter, Procter, where I know for a fact that thing growing up was Proctor, Tor. And Desi Arnaz is now Desi Arnaz.
And
also in Snow White, it's now magic mirror on the wall, not mirror on the wall.
Have you guys ever heard of Jiffy peanut butter?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not. There's no such thing. It's Jif peanut butter.
Jif.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's just some crazy, and it could just be that once somebody tells us something, we all just run with it. But I mean, I've seen boxes. People have been posting it recently, like boxes of Fruit Loops, and fruit is spelled F-R-O-O-T now, and it looks so ridiculous to me. And it could just be because somebody posted it, but I don't remember it being spelled F-R-O-O-T. That word doesn't even. It looks ridiculous. And I don't know if you guys have seen stuff like that. It's very interesting. I don't understand how it would even work, or how you would attribute that to like a time change or a historical change. I think it's more just humans possibly getting one idea in their head. The whole idea was if you build it, blank what? In the great movie Field of Dreams.
They will come.
Right. It's not they will come. It's he will come. See, I mean, that's the kind of thing where you're like, and I've heard these things and tried, and I've said, no, they're wrong. I'm going to go find it. And you go look at the movie, and it's if you build it, he will come. And it's just crazy. Is it just simply because once somebody said it, it kind of caught on, and from that point, everybody started saying, if you build it, they will come, and we just kind of forgot what the original line was? It's possible, but I think the Mandela effect is certainly interesting. Have you guys seen Jesse Spots does a good couple videos on that. He's been looking into that. I think I like his videos.
I was going to say, didn't that happen with Star Trek? You know, everybody thought that it was, you know, beam me up, Scotty, but he never actually ever said that.
Really?
Oh, that's interesting.
No way.
Now, I'm writing that one down. I got to go check. I don't believe that one.
Beam me up, Scott. I've used that line to police officers when I got pulled over for speeding.
Yeah, but this was years ago. This was years ago that everyone, you know, I saw this article ages ago that he's never ever said in any of the episodes, you know, beam me up, Scotty. It was like, Scotty, beam me up. That's the closest he ever said.
That's crazy. You know, it's interesting. One of the things that I found fascinating is you guys all know who James Holmes is. He's the alleged Aurora shooter. But there is an interview with him online before any of this happened, and he is talking about the work that he was doing in university, where he was developing certain sigils and techniques to actually cause people's memory to be changed retroactively after the fact. And I just thought that was astounding that, you know, he would be working on something like that.
That's unbelievable.
It is so easy to program our minds. It's actually kind of embarrassing on how easy it was. I studied hypnosis for a while, and the thing that amazed me about it is how simple it is. And you know, just planting these things in your head. You know, all you have to do is distract somebody from consciously thinking. And that's what happened on 9/11. Just jumping back to 9/11. After the second tower fell, I think it was maybe 10, 15 minutes later, highest TV-rated moment in world history. Everybody's watching the major news networks. Everyone's in shock, so they're distracted. And then all of a sudden comes the Harley shirt guy. And he goes, you know, I saw the whole thing. I live on the 47th floor, just 5 blocks from the World Trade Towers. I watched the second plane come in out of nowhere, ream into the building, coming out the other side. Then the buildings collapsed, mostly
because
due to
of the structural damage.
And people are in shock. That goes into their subconscious. 6 months later, NIST, the fake investigation in 9/11, says that, and everybody goes, oh yeah. Because they forgot that they even heard that, and it's in their subconscious, and they've been programmed. It's that simple.
Has anyone ever looked into how quickly after the first plane hit, or I guess after the TV went live, that they started saying Osama bin Laden?
Like
immediately.
Minutes.
Yeah, it was minutes, huh?
Paul Bremer was on there. He was supposed to be in the building with everyone else in his company that got wiped out, but he happened to be going on CNN that day as a terrorist expert.
Oh my goodness, it's too much, just too much. I mean, I just had one thing I didn't mention earlier about why I think the buildings were meant to come down is in 1974, when they were built, they were the tallest buildings in the world. So you could see where they put up this big radio mast or this big tower, this satellite or antenna, and then knowing that eventually they're going to need to go taller. And to me, it just makes all the sense that it's kind of like whoever has the tallest building has the most coverage. And I actually have another video coming out on something called Google Loom, and you can look that up if you want to lose your mind real quick. But Google Loom is a high-altitude helium balloon that they're going to be putting into action here pretty quickly, and it is going to sit up in the stratosphere and provide internet access to everyone who doesn't have internet access. And it's like they just are talking about it as if satellites don't exist. They don't mention satellites. They act like this is supposed to be really cool, that this balloon is going up there and what equipment will be on it and who will get internet access in New Zealand that doesn't have it now. And it's like, you jackasses,
You-
what
you
happened to
think-
satellites?
You think they might know something there, Jaron?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I made a video about it. It's actually kind of short, but just basically saying that this is obvious that they go right over it in these articles, and people will just gloss right over it. Nobody even sees it, and I guess that's more evidence that they're just all sleeping, because they'll swear to you that there's no possible way we have internet access without satellites, and then you don't know how many people I've said, oh, so they don't run fiber optic cables under the ocean? They're like, you idiot! Like they would run wires across the ocean. It's like, why don't you look it up? That's exactly how internet works. The internet is through wires that are on the bottom of the damn Atlantic Ocean. It's like
Absolutely.
They act like we're fools for knowing that, or that these things are just known, that all satellites up in space gives us internet access, and all our cell phones talk to the satellites in space, but then they don't work on the plane, which is 7 miles closer to the damn satellites. So makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. And think about also how much lag there would be if these signals were being processed actually through a satellite. The lag would be just unbearable.
Yeah, you'd think so. I mean, even a lag today, calling somebody in France or something, is 2 or 3 seconds. Yet those guys didn't have to wait very long on the moon, did they, to get their directions from mission control?
Think about the GPS using satellites. So all these satellites, the Earth is spinning. These satellites are moving in all different directions, crisscrossing all over the place, and they're how high are they? 250 miles or whatever. So they're drawing lines down to your location, and if you moved a mile, let alone 50 feet, it's such a subtle change in the angle to each one of those satellites. It's barely measurable versus a ground-based system where every foot you move makes a bigger move angularly than those long extended angles.
Absolutely.
And it works perfectly. When I was a kid, I'm probably older than most of you. We had the Loran system, which was numbers and lines that intersect, and you look on the chart and you find the numbers, and it puts you exactly where you are. I actually was in the middle of Long Island Sound in the fog, and I actually hit the buoy that I was looking for because this thing was so accurate. Just take that, change the name to GPS, put a computer graphic interface on it with some high altitude pictures, boom, and call it GPS, and everybody falls for it.
It is a Loran system. It's now called eLoran, is the methodology they're using.
And the people out there that say, no, GPS is real, what about where there's no cell service? I'll give you the answer to that. It's radio waves. They use radio waves before cell towers, and radio waves span every single spot on the globe.
Yeah, the Gwen system.
Yep.
And look into Aaron Dover does some great videos about the satellites, and there's video footage of them talking about the satellite or radio system picking up in Hawaii from around Virginia, I think, in the 30s and 40s. It's simply traveling across the flat plains. There is no satellite helping them out, and I think these are the things that they may have realized around that time period, and might be why Tesla got his stuff destroyed, and that they started to find out that, hey, we can just access this radio waves, and these waves of electricity are just hovering above the flat Earth. So very interesting. And I think I mentioned it before. They did a study in Russia. They were trying to figure out what the cost would be of a ground-based GPS system, and they ran the tests and said with 300 ground-based systems that the GPS could be accurate within a meter, and the cost of it would be 1/10 of the cost of satellites in space. And this was an official published report. And if you just look at the GPS system that Russia uses, recently the CEO of the company, or the head of it, was indicted for theft of some couple $100 million, because he had taken all this money from companies that were investing in this system and just stolen it because they weren't going to put satellites in space. So it's real easy to charge people, and I've had so many comments on my videos from people saying, what about all these companies paying all this money for satellites? And it's like, exactly. We wonder where this money comes from, this black budget money, and what NASA's doing. And when somebody pays you $500 million for a satellite, and it costs you $50 million to send up one of your little aluminum rockets, and to say, okay, we put your satellite out there, and it's going to be on this system, and you can watch the results right here on this computer and log into this website, and that's a easy theft of $450 million. And everybody thinks the system goes on as they always thought it did. The company has its access to the data it wants. NASA has the money. The rocket went up, so all the NASA fanboys get their launch out of Cape Canaveral, and we all just go about our daily lives and have no idea that it's all a joke.
Yeah, it's absolutely all ground-based, for sure. There's no doubt about that. And even even when we look at satellites and how they work, a lot of people will say, well, gee, how am I pointing my satellite dish up in the air and getting reception? And in my opinion, the answer to that is that they are bouncing it. They're doing it one of two ways. They're either using natural refraction, which all radio waves refract downwards pretty much towards the Earth. And that's also another reason why, Jaron, they would want to have such high radio towers. But over-the-horizon radar absolutely behaves that way, and most RF signals do that. So they are either doing it via a high vantage point and letting natural refraction bring those signals down to the Earth, or there is indeed a firmament up there, which I more and more tend to believe that there is such a thing up there, and they are literally bouncing those radio waves off of it, because when you get into the microwave frequencies, they act more and more like light waves. So
it could even be not even a physical firmament. For example, it could be a magnetic.
Electromagnetic, absolutely, yes.
Right, and it's just hitting that, and it can't go past the magnetic flux up there, and it just comes right back, right?
Right, and you've seen. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, I would say it's actually a physical one because of the Operation Fishbowl footage.
Yeah.
Because you see something when the explosion happens, you see something heat up, and the sort of blast wave go outwards in a kind of ring rather than upwards. Yeah. But you see a center that is glowing and then starts to fade as it cools, and this ring sort of describing the actual dome. So it's actually exploding against something rather than just exploding in free air. So I'm pretty positive that it's a physical dome.
Yeah, it could be. There's a thing that they can do some very interesting things with. You've seen probably acoustic levitation. Mm-hmm. And of course, the way acoustic levitation works is when the waves are put out in such a pattern where the phase of them actually kind of locks together, you get what's called a standing wave. Mm-hmm. And the standing wave is what actually gives those electromagnetic waves their properties where they can actually physically touch and lift things up in the air. That's caused by a standing wave. And so if the Earth is indeed electromagnetically based, which I absolutely believe that it is, you could have an electromagnetic series of waves up in space that are creating these very same standing waves, which can give very much the appearance or the feel of something physical. So that's what I said. It could be actual crystalline, as it's described in the Bible, or it could be kind of like a Star Trek shield, with the standing waves.
I still think it's impressive when you take two magnets and you push them together. That feels physical. There is definitely that repulsion there. You can actually feel a ball. So to me, I can easily imagine the same thing happening, up at where the dome would be. That simply is a huge kind of repellent. But I think would happen the same thing.
But that wouldn't heat up and cool down, would it?
I'm not sure if that would or not.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Hey Bob, will you tell everybody? Will you tell everybody for me just your satellite background? Because I think it's important when you talk about satellite for people to understand that you used to work in the industry.
Okay. Yeah, I did. I worked for several years in the industry. I'm an electrical engineer by trade, and I worked for many years for several different companies. doing the ground-based satellite systems. Obviously, I had nothing to do with what was being shot into space, but I worked at the technical operations centers or the terminal operations centers, did the engineering for them. We actually did the construct for them, and in addition to that, I also worked in terrestrial microwave. And we would actually be literally out on the road building these microwave sites. I'm sure you've all seen them all over the place. Point-to-point terrestrial microwaves. I was a field engineer. And, it never occurred to me even then that when the calculations were being made to set up these terrestrially based microwave systems, that the curvature of the Earth was never taken into consideration. And, I think about that now, and it absolutely blows my mind that I never thought about that then. But so anyway, that's just one of the many things that it was very difficult for me to get past, the idea that there were no satellites. And in order for me to do that, I had to really sit down and do some reflection on a lot of the engineering that we did, and try and figure out, well, if there really aren't satellites up there, then how is this done? And one of the conclusions that I came to that I think is most plausible is, when you look at satellite signals, you're generally shown what's called a footprint. And that footprint is usually kind of like an elongated circle. And, the mainstream explanation is said that the footprint is caused by the radiation pattern of the antenna that is being broadcast, from the satellite up above, like the United States, for example. But another way that you could get that footprint is if you are aware of some type of either physical barrier or electromagnetic barrier that will reflect radio signals back down to Earth, much like the ham radio operators use when they talk over skip. That if you were to take a transmitting station and beam that signal up at, from a certain place and hit that firmament or whatever it is that's up there, when it comes down, it will actually take the form of an elongated circle. And so there you have your footprint, and that would be created from a, kind of a side projection, if you will. And that's kind of the conclusion that I came to. And the more geometry that I looked at, when I was able to actually find, uplink sites, and by the way, those seem to be very well hidden. That's something they don't like getting out, is where these uplink sites actually are. But when you get into the more, into the less mainstream commercial applications, I guess, you can actually find some of them. And so I started doing some research, and it's interesting because the geometry lines up with those Earth stations as to where their destination antennas would be. So that's my background in it, and I managed to get past it. The idea that there aren't any satellites, because the more I thought about it, even in GPS, when you start considering that the way they work is essentially a variation on the Doppler effect. And when they're comparing the phase of signals being sent out and coming back, radar works the same way. They have like a coherent oscillator that's running all the time, and then when a radar signal sends a beam out and then it's reflected back, it's a certain degree out of phase, and this is consistent with the Doppler effect. And from that, you can calculate speed and distance. So GPS is basically the same way, except I believe that it's not being done, necessarily at the microwave frequencies. It may be because, the GPS receivers seem to be operating there, but to say that that's being done from a satellite that is I believe they say those GPSers are like 25,000 miles out in space. When you look at the wavelengths and how short they are, it seems to me that it would be physically impossible to get any phase differential that would give you anything usable at those distances, unless you were running at a frequency that's much, much higher than what they're talking about now. So anyway, that's my background with it, and there you have it.
Well, awesome. Thank you for that. You guys have anything else on satellites or any of that, or we could move into just a quick talk about flat Earth and cover some of that, and then also talk about Max Egan. Anything from either Dave Weiss?
Yeah. Can you talk about the balloon launches that are coming up? You have any information on parts of what's happening there?
Yeah, well, I sent out an email to everyone that had, when I put out the last video and said that the price was higher than I thought it was going to be. It was about $500. I only had a total of 3 people that had responded that they were interested in launching. And because of, I don't know if you've seen, but some of the channels out there were saying, oh, jeranism, we're going to be watching you. You need to make sure that this thing's perfect, et cetera, et cetera. Well, my problem was that I can't launch from where I'm at, because every time I do the little run the simulation, it ends up 50 miles into the ocean. And then on top of that, being in the city I'm in, Salinas, you're actually not allowed to launch here or the neighboring city, Monterey, because both have fairly large airports. So I did send an email to all the people who had ever responded about the balloons and just gave them all the details about launching it, and said I'd be happy to put their videos on my channel if they didn't have a YouTube account or didn't know how to do it. But I did kind of put specific restrictions on it, saying that I wouldn't take any GoPro footage, and also I didn't want edited footage. So I know that I've kind of told people who have asked that I'm really interested in watching Thrive and Survives, because I looked into really heavily the prices of these things, and he got $2,500 to do this, and I think to me that is like top of the line a kind of job. He should be able to have the best. Not saying that his test will go off perfectly, but I think that's definitely one to watch. And then haven't had anybody confirm to me that for sure they are launching. I do have a balloon that we're sending to Bob, and him and TJ are going to go out and launch that in Kansas, because they've got, obviously a lot of room for that to land out there. But I don't think it's going to be for the eclipse. So that's kind of where we are as far as that goes. I did have some people donate some money that's going to go with the balloon to Bob, so that he can get the things he needs to send that up. Because I did get a really cool, huge military-sized balloon to send up. So we want to make sure that rather than take a chance of me losing it in the water, and then that also means I have to somehow get throwaway cameras on the thing, and then I'd have to figure out how to get live footage from it. It just would be a nightmare. Too many things could go wrong. It'd be better to have Bob and TJ do it out there in the flat plains, to where they can recover it and make sure they get it back. And so that's kind of the end of it as far as I go. I mean, I told people I'd be happy, like I said, to put their videos up, but I haven't had anybody that's emailed me and actually said, for sure we're doing it. Most people, I think, are going to be watching Thrive and Survive, hoping that the 3 that were still interested will do it. I haven't followed up with them, though. I did give them all the details, who to order from, who to ask for. So hopefully they're still going to do it. That'd be awesome if we could see, even if it's 4 or 5 balloons from different areas of the world around the same time. Anybody know anything about the plan for Thrive and Survive as far as doing that? I haven't seen a recent update on it or anything.
Yeah, all I know is that he has got, well, right now they're having a little bit of problems, I guess, with customs in England getting it back to him, so he's hoping that it makes it back on time. But he's got it equipped with some infrared cameras and just a whole slew of different cameras, actually. And he's really got it decked out, so hopefully it should be pretty interesting.
Yeah, it should be interesting. But no, I would love to launch one, and I was going to just do it anyway. I kind of said, I'm just going to launch one at night. I don't care what the rules are. And then Bob had to make me feel bad by saying, something could happen. It could get in a jet engine. And then I was like, at that point, now I know that if I did launch one, I would end up being responsible for something like that. Like, thanks, Bob. If I just would have not thought about it, then I couldn't have been responsible. But no, he's definitely right. He's a pilot, so he's thinking more than I am, believe me.
I mean, launching a balloon at night and seeing the sun, that's a game changer right there. If you can prove, where it is and when it went up.
Absolutely. And I would hope somebody would do that. But then again, I just would reiterate, really be careful about where you're at. And I mean, for me, like I said, they won't allow any balloon launches from where I'm at, either this city or Monterey. So, right. And that's because there's constantly planes coming in and out of these 2 airports. And I know that pretty much is going to be the case up the coast of California, because you have San Jose International Airport, San Francisco. But I'm assuming that somebody somewhere's got a pretty open spot to where they could feel safe
Well,
putting that
that and you
thing up
can
there at night.
you can and you could probably get away with that too, because I mean there are definite air traffic corridors that are used and set forth by air traffic control. So, and that information I think you can probably find fairly easily. So if you would do it like at night at a point where there's not a whole lot of air traffic and you're definitely clear of a lot of those corridors, then you're probably fairly safe in doing it. I was just thinking, if we launched a balloon late at night and you couldn't see it, and an aircraft, came forward and it ripped through the jet engine or brought it down, that would be something, me personally, I could never live with that. I mean, that would just be horrible.
No, me either, and it's not something that I want to take the chance on doing either. But
Even if it was a chemtrail plane?
Well,
maybe the pilot doesn't know.
Yeah, in that case, you're right. Yeah, but good thought.
And I know that I don't know enough about any of that stuff that I wouldn't feel right about doing it. In fact, I had all these visions of grandeur that I was just going to kind of blow it up in the backyard, and we have a huge empty field near our house, and I was just going to walk there in the middle of the night and release it. But then it became the fact of, okay, it's going to end up in the water. Then I started looking into exactly what I would need to get a live feed from it, and I don't know if you've seen, but that is really tough to do. Once you get above a certain height, you just don't get footage back because my camera would end up in the water. So I'd have to travel pretty far inland, say towards Nevada. Then the problem becomes it's not as easy as just letting it go and running inside and like hiding from the fact that you just did something you're not supposed to, because I'd have to also go and retrieve it. So if it
Right.
did break some sort of law or something, and
But,
that's just my whole issue. I mean,
Dave, you got a point there, though. Even if it was a chemtrail plane, because it would be just that. It would be the chemtrail planes that do not adhere to those corridors, and they would be probably the highest probability or highest chance of being brought down by one. So maybe we'll do that.
I'd be interested to look into if anybody's ever gotten in trouble for it. Not that I've heard of. I know somebody's gotten in trouble for shooting lasers at planes, but I've never heard of anybody getting in trouble for any kind of balloon launch. Have you?
I have not.
Not
Yeah,
me
I've not
either.
either.
I'd love to fire that 3,500 milliwatt laser, though, at the ISS.
Well, I will admit that I did fire your laser at the ISS once or twice because I really was trying to crash it. But
Yeah, and that was the little one.
that was the little one. I don't know if it was hitting it, but
Yeah,
I was
now we got the
certainly
monster
shooting
one.
I was firing my laser last night at a silverfish high up in the ceiling because I couldn't get to it. So I did that for about 15, 20 minutes until it fell off.
Did it fry?
A quick a rookie question about the ISS. It's trackable. Some people think it's a drone, but I don't think that's the case. Is it? I mean, what do you think it is? Is it going like a wandering star, also known as a planet? Just at a faster speed, closer.
No, I definitely think it is. I think it's exactly the same height as the stars, and the reason I said that, and I've mentioned this before, that my wife was 8 miles away from me, and we were both, after one of our tests, we're just both looking in the sky and talking on the phone and comparing where airplanes were crossing stars, because we noticed such a huge difference to where I would see an airplane flying, near the Small Dipper or near Polaris or whatever, and would ask her, where do you see this plane right now? And it would be completely, and I'm talking 90 or even 130 degrees away from where I see it. And so we kind of started to be able to guess where one would see the other one. So I would see a plane and I would say, let me guess, you see this at this location? And she would say, yeah. And so I was able to guess. Well, then all of a sudden she had pointed out, hey, there's the ISS. And we looked up and I saw it and I said, where do you have it now? And she said, it's about to cross the second star of the Big Dipper. And I said, right now? And she said, just crossed it. And at that exact time, I saw the same exact point. So it was the only thing in the sky, and I've never had anybody email me and say that they've tried this, but again, if anybody has a friend 10 miles away or something, try this experiment. Figure out when the ISS is going to cross you. Both you guys go outside and be on the phone and see if it crosses from your perspective and his perspective or her perspective, the exact same point in the sky, because that would be essentially proving that the ISS is the same height as the stars. Now,
How did you know it was the ISS, by the way?
well, it's definitely easy to spot because it doesn't blink. So usually when you see a plane, I would say, to me at least, 90% of the time a plane definitely has a flicker. And the ISS is a more pronounced single point of light, which makes no sense, and it moves at a very constant speed, but not as fast as you would see a plane, but not very much slower. It's certainly not a planet or any kind of movement you would see from a star. And it marks a very uniform, and I mean uniform as in from start to finish, not like every time, because it is sometimes different, but it's very uniform as far as its arc across the sky. And it always starts, for us, it's always in the southwest or northwest, and you just kind of see it appear out of the horizon area there, and it takes about anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes, I guess, to go the length of your sky, which again just disproves the whole thing, which I tried to explain in GLOBUL, because they say that that's the sun reflecting off of it. It just makes no sense, because how is it able, if I can see half the stars at night in the sky in my view of the entire half hemisphere, or whatever you want to call it, how could that go all the way across in 10 minutes when, technically speaking, it should take 45?
Yeah. Can I throw in my 2 cents on that?
Please.
Okay. I honestly do believe that it is a drone, except the type of drone. First of all, when you think about the height that the ISS is supposed to be, even if it's the size of a football field, that's like saying that, that I can see I can see a football field in Cheyenne, Wyoming, or even further north. I don't believe that. So I believe it's got to be much, much closer. And I think that probably what it is it's a very high-flying drone that has been modified with extra appendages so that, if people are observing it, they see, what they think are the solar collector arrays. And I think also that it's probably lit up. They probably have it covered with some sort of clear material that's actually transparent or highly luminescent, and it's lit up pretty much like a Christmas tree. And so when people are observing it with their telescopes or anything like that, it takes this form of something that has appendages that look like solar collectors, except they're just additional appendages maybe for the high flight. Because the higher you go, obviously, the less atmosphere you have to work against. So the more wing surface that you would have to work with, the better you would be able to maintain those altitudes. So I tend to think it is a drone.
And then they say the wind up there is like nothing. Reading about that Google Loom, they say it's 5 to 10 mile an hour wind at the stratosphere.
I wanted to throw in there too that not too long ago I sent you guys an email about the NASA planes that they have. They have a variety of planes, and one of them is a 24-hour drone. It can just fly around for 24 hours at high altitudes. I don't remember if it was 60 or 70,000. So they've got stuff that can fly around.
I am interested, and if anybody knows this, you can email me, or when they do the switch, as far as I think right now we still have the ISS coming into the United States from the northwest. When they do the switch and it starts coming in from the southwest, how do they do that switch? When does the path change? Who is steering it? What is I don't know. Does anybody know anything about that? And I wonder if we looked at the time periods that it switches, is it avoiding somehow seeing the moon? Is it avoiding something about the moon? Why would it even need to switch?
You're talking about the ISS cameras?
No, the actual path of the ISS. It's about every, I don't want to take a wild guess. I'm going to guess it's 2 weeks. Could be 3 weeks. It switches. For instance, you can kind of picture right now the wavy line coming up from the northwest across the United States, then down under Africa, and then back up to come back up at the North America. But at times, then they switch it, and then it comes, excuse me, then it comes across South America and kind of heads up by New York, then goes over Europe and then back down under Australia, where it would come up again in South America. So I've never actually, I've just turned on the ISS live and said, oh, they're on the different track, or oh, they're on this track. But I've never actually seen, well, when did they make those switches?
Yeah,
Like,
you know, that's interesting because, you know, the orbit is something that requires a very, very stable equilibrium, if you will.
that's
So
what I
for
mean.
them,
Yeah, how do they move it?
yeah, I mean, it would take a massive thrust, you know, if they were actually doing something like that. And, you know, to move that big old, you know, tank up there like that, it would, frankly, I think it would stress it out to the point it would snap it in two.
I mean, it's so
Um,
clearly fake. I mean, that's why, for the most part, looking into it to me is something I just get tired of, because it's the same thing with why is it going 17,000 miles per hour if escape velocity is 25,000 miles per hour? So are you telling me the Soyuz and those things exit at 25,000 miles per hour and then brake to get to the speed of the space station? Or I just don't understand any of that. It just doesn't make sense when you get into the idea of space and how does it go from a spinning atmosphere to static space and not rip it in half?
Yeah, and not only that, when it's supposedly achieving the hypersonic speeds required to go out into orbit, why isn't the launch vehicle absolutely red hot? I mean, look at, you know, like as we were talking about last week, look at the SR-71. That's one of the biggest problems they have. This is something that's made out of pure titanium, to the point where when it sits on the ground, it just leaks. Because it's designed for hypersonic flight, which is, by the way, nowhere near what they are saying that these vehicles are going to Saturn V and the shuttle when they actually reach escape velocity. So I mean, it's just such utter BS. That thing would long before it ever got out into orbit, it would be glowing red hot. It would just simply have to be.
Yeah, I've seen temperatures ranging anywhere from 3 to 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit on that exit. And like we've said, we keep pointing out, there's stickers on their damn little space shuttles, the little Soyuz and all these little rockets that go out there. And go ahead and show me a sticker that survives 1 second in 4,500 degrees, and maybe I'll start to believe in your space theory.
Can't we just look at the plans for the Saturn V rocket and determine whether it was real?
Oh, you know what? They lost him. They just misplaced him, really. And they didn't notice until somebody made an FOIA request for him.
Yeah,
Imagine that.
You
Yeah,
got to
what
wonder
about
what
all
they're made of.
Yeah, and everything
Yeah.
from the moon, they lost that also. All the photos, everything.
Yep.
But I think
What
they
a
have
freaky
one
dude.
rock, but that was determined to be
Petrified wood.
yeah.
In that video of Buzz Aldrin being drunk, at one point he's talking about, he's like, I have another plan. He says, we're gonna send a rocket to Venus, and like everybody in the crowd laughs because they think he's joking, and then he says, because men are from Mars and women are from Venus, so we need 2 women to go to Venus, and everybody laughs again, and he's like, I'm serious. We're gonna just fly by, and he's like telling this story. I'm like, that's towards the sun, guy. And that's his plan. His plan is that we need 2 women to go to Venus because men are from Mars, women are from Venus. I'm like, this is the guy they're sending out on their humanitarian, their their speaking venues, trying to get people excited about going to Mars and going to Venus now. It's like, okay, keep talking. Guy's a joker.
Hey, in that video I made today about the space bag that flies around the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour and it gets ahead of the ISS, how it does that, I have no idea. They were talking about how everything, all the satellites and space junk and everything, flies around the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour. And I want to know how that is, since like this space bag sinks down to the Earth. It took 9 months for this space bag that weighed 30 pounds, the size of a backpack, to get to the Earth's atmosphere and burn up, while they had some box or tank. They called it a tank, not a box. This this tank filled with some freon or something like that. It orbited the Earth for 2 years before it burned up in the Earth's atmosphere. So my question is, I thought that the ISS was orbiting the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour because it has its own force, its own thrust, whatever that is, pushing it. But how is all space debris, all satellites, all moving at the same exact speed as the ISS? Do they all have their own rockets on them? What are they doing?
Yeah, the way they describe it is just so painful because they say everything is falling, which, again, this goes back to my talking about reality versus Fantasyland, which you can say that, sure. They say imagine a tower that was standing all the way to 250 miles in space, and if you stepped off that tower, you would immediately fall to the earth, right? And if you jumped off that tower, you would obviously go for a little bit and then fall and hit the earth, but a little further than if you just stepped off. Now imagine that you were to run, and you could run at 25,000 miles per hour off the top of that tower. They say you would, the same thing, you would fall, but you would fall around the planet because it's spinning at such a rate that you never hit the ground, you just keep falling, which, I will give him this, makes sense if that's the only thing that's doing that. But they say it's happening all around, and this is where it gets to me just, I go crazy because you can't, that's not physically possible. Then you're saying that somebody underneath the globe is also standing on the same tower, or not the same tower, same height tower, but they can't fall because they're upside down. So, and they'll just say, no, you're missing, there's no up or down in space, and you've heard me say it 1,000 times, there's up and down in reality. So I don't care that there's no up and down in space. That doesn't make sense in my world. It doesn't, you can't just say that and me say, oh, okay, I didn't know that. It just doesn't work for me.
All of that is based on a thought experiment by Einstein, actually.
Right, the stupid cannon thing.
Yeah, so...
Which makes sense if it's just the cannon sitting at the top. But the problem is they never show that thought experiment with cannons everywhere on the globe, which is essentially the same thing.
The point I was going to make was that in that thought experiment, speed is equal essentially to the height, because you know, if you're at a certain height, you have to be going at a certain speed to achieve free fall. So if you're even higher, you have to go even faster to do that. Yeah. So if they're all going at the same speed, that means they're all at the same height, which is clearly not true.
No, and they would have to be adjusting all the time. They even say that the solar radiation, the solar rays, are always adjusting, and they have to constantly adjust the speeds of satellite. I mean, you're telling me there's like something stupid, like 5,000 active satellites, or it might even be more, but that all these satellites, to maintain their orbits, must constantly be squirting these little, the equivalent of a fire extinguisher, to readjust themselves into the right. It's just, it's complete horseshit. And I'll just, while we're talking about that, and one thing from my most recent video, and to me it just seems so simple when I explain it, and I still don't get people understanding, but people don't understand where I was coming from with the last one when I said, if you think about where I'm at now, every single one of you is below my horizon. No matter where you're at in the world, you can't be above my horizon, you're below it. Well, to Bob, we're also all below his horizon. And to Dave, we're all below his horizon, which they just explain away by saying, well, it's because it's a globe, and yeah, we all are below. No, that's not reality. How can I be below Bob and Bob be below me? It makes no sense.
Because in their ball world, wherever you are is the top. It's
exactly
from your point of view. So if you're a quarter of the way around the world, I'm a quarter of the way below you from your point of view. It's like your horizon for wherever you are. So in their world, it makes perfect sense, but it's ridiculous.
Well, it's not reality. In their world, what they're describing is a metaphysical idea of there's this ball and everyone gets the top position. And that's what we all know. We all know we're each at the very top of the globe, which is fine if there's one person. As soon as you introduce a second person, even one of the laws of nature is that two things cannot occupy the same place in reality. It's impossible. So you can't on one end tell me that, oh, well, it is possible in this instance, but not possible in any other place. And again, why would any of us ever believe anything that we can see no example of? We just accept that is the example, is what they're telling us happens.
I do have to say that in their model, okay, it can be true that you can be below Bob's horizon and Bob can be below yours, because the idea is that if you're in two different places on the globe, then between you will be a hump, essentially, of the Earth. So you'll both be below each other's horizon, wouldn't you?
Say it again.
Between the two of you on the globe, there'll be a hump between you. A hump of Earth, you know.
Well, I thought that we just said, though, that each person occupies the top. So now what you're saying is that nobody occupies the top, that both people would occupy, for instance, the 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock position on a clock.
Right, and this is their model, okay, that we're all being pulled to the center of this ball, and what they would argue is that, you know, if you're on one point on the Earth and on the ball, and somebody else is on another point on the ball, then between you would be a hump of Earth, and yes, you would be below each other's horizon. I'm just trying to say that.
No, I see. I'm just saying that makes sense if you then take away that each of us has the top position. Or you're saying that between 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock, there would essentially be a hump in between those two people.
Yes.
Yeah.
What you're saying.
It's
It's
a relative position, you know, on the spherical model.
Yeah, and again, I just, and you know, the whole reason I started my channel was I wanted people to look at things in a more practical way, because, and I wouldn't have ever said this if there was proof of the globe. That's all you need to do is prove it to me, and I'm done. I have nothing else to say. The problem is there is no proof, and they just run around screaming that it must be true, and their examples of it do not work in the reality that we know, in the reality that we see, the reality that we experience. There is no, when they say there's no up and down in space, which is the way they get away with, oh, somebody's underneath you, they're standing upside down, but they're not really. It's just all metaphysical. It's a nice idea. It's a nice thought experiment. It may work on paper, but unfortunately, we all were given a brain to understand how reality works. And as soon as you start introducing things that must be told to you are that way because we say so, again, all the ISS has to do is zoom in with its little camera and show us the people that are coming underneath the globe being upside down and being held to the ground with their magnetic feet, and the gravity's pushing them up, and everybody would be satisfied. But believe me, they can't show it, or they would have shown it in the last 50 years of space travel. It simply doesn't happen.
Have you seen the experiment with the two plumb lines?
No, but I mean, I've kind of thought about those before, but where do you mean? Where from?
So I figured I saw someone did a video on it. It could have been a little bit better, but the idea was perfect. A plumb line, for those of you who don't know, is you just have a line that has a weight with a pointer on it, or and you hang it, and it supposedly points towards the center of the Earth from wherever you are. And that's what builders use to get a straight line when they're building a brick wall. They'll hang a plumb line, let gravity show them which way is straight, and then they build the corner of the wall to that line. If that is the case, a building like the World Trade Towers would be wider at the top because you have two lines that are slightly separated, and they're going to be pointing at a slightly different angle because of the slight curve of the Earth. So even if it's only a quarter of an inch or whatever, the building is going to be wider at the top.
Exactly.
Because the plumb lines create a pizza slice.
Right, which we already know that doesn't take place.
It doesn't take place.
Right, it doesn't. And the other question that I've always thought about too is, they say that if wherever we are standing on the Earth, we would basically be standing with gravity pulling directly down at our feet, much like the plumb line. Well, what if I'm on the side of the globe, and yes, I understand while I'm being held on with the gravity pulling straight down to my feet, but I'm still sideways, with respect to somebody standing on the top of the Earth. So my question is what's stopping me from falling over to one side?
Yeah, absolutely nothing. And it's the same thing with bridges. I mean, bridges all prove the Earth to be flat, especially when you get into like the Pontchartrain Bridge. And I know, Bob, you said you've actually traveled that, right?
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
I've been on Pontchartrain Bridge many times.
and that's 24 miles, isn't it? I think it's 24. That's a
Something like
estimate.
that. An
But I mean,
amazing
even
bridge.
yeah, even that distance, the way that Wikipedia describes the adjustment for the curvature of the Earth is they say that it's, I want to say, is it 2 inches? Or they built it, it
Yeah,
might be
two
two,
2 inches. Yes, I think that's right. It's
yeah,
like
they
wow.
built it 2 inches short, they say,
To
or 2 inches.
compensate for
Yeah,
how many hundred feet of curvature?
well, 24 miles, I'll figure that out real quick, but
It's a
it's
lot.
a lot more than that. 24 times 8 times 24. So that's 4608 divided by 12. So that's 384 feet. I mean, it's just ridiculous when you think about it. And I've still been asking this pilot was going to do it for me, but he wanted to charge me an arm and a leg. But he flies out over the Pacific Ocean, and I told him what's the furthest he could see as far as a coastline of California, left to right. And he said, I asked him, could he see like San Luis Obispo to Santa Cruz? And he told me he could. He could see that. And I said, okay, can you take me a picture of that? And he wanted to charge me an arm and a leg. But imagine Santa Clara or Santa Cruz, California, which is on the coast there, and San Luis Obispo, which is maybe halfway to LA, a little bit more further south. But if somebody can take a photo of that, that distance has to have a curvature. But it doesn't. It will just be the coastline. There will not be. It does not go down hill, and I believe that the curvature on that, just that distance, is around 310 or 320 feet, and that's the size of the Statue of Liberty. And I mean, it's just simply ridiculous that we would believe that that hump of water exists, number one, in that area of the Pacific Ocean. I know when I always explain California to Hawaii, that gets a little bit out there. It is 2,500 miles, and somebody might picture a 700-mile high bulge of water if they are crazy. But when you picture that okay, I see it's a lot of water out there. But then if you kind of pull that in and say, now let's look at the coastline of California, talking from Santa Cruz to San Luis Obispo, you're saying that there is a hump of water as high as the Statue of Liberty in between those two cities, and the water magically stays in the hump formation. It doesn't spill down to the two sides and level out. The fact that it can't be measured, number one, should be key. We're talking science. Science is supposed to be measured, repeatable, and this is what makes it crazy to me when NASA can come out and say, oh, on this planet over here, it rains glass sideways. It's like, what the hell happened to science? That's a repeatable, testable, provable theory, or are you just saying things? Because you can't test that. It's ridiculous. Or they say that on Saturn and Jupiter it rains diamonds. Does that
Yeah,
make
well,
does that make science sound fun?
when you have access to technology that nobody else can even fathom, you can just make up anything you want.
It's just, even pictures of Pluto. It's just easy.
Yep, it's
Yep.
ridiculous.
So anything else on that, guys? Before we go
Well,
ahead.
not on that. I was going to. There was something I was going to mention earlier on, but conversation just ran away. We're talking about things burning up in the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I started looking at the external tank from the space shuttle, which is supposed to burn up in the atmosphere. But I've seen like three videos of external tanks being dropped, and nothing. It just literally. Well, the video of those tanks are very dodgy anyway. Sudden changes from daytime to nighttime, and then back to daytime again, and different orientations and stuff. It's just a bit ridiculous. But nothing, as far as I can tell, nothing actually seems to burn up in the atmosphere if they're dropped from that height.
Yeah, agreed.
I
And
don't see it either.
what's interesting about that, Dave, and I think this goes back to what one of you were saying earlier. about how the orbit has to be achieved by falling at the same speed, I think is what you said, as the height. But I was thinking, terminal velocity, at least in an atmosphere, ranges anywhere from 120 to as high as 300 miles an hour. So if gravity is at 95%, it just seems highly implausible that that 95% gravity would increase terminal velocity to 17,000 plus miles an hour at a vertical descent. That seems absolutely absurd.
It just makes no sense, and I still don't understand the moon. I don't understand how we just all accept that theory that the moon is able to remain in orbit because it's outside of the huge Earth's gravitational pull. It's outside of that area, but yet the moon, which is much smaller, has enough gravitational force on the Earth to pull its water. It just really makes no sense.
What about the fact that the sun's magical gravity that holds the Earth into place as the moon goes around the Earth away from the sun?
Doesn't touch it, huh?
It doesn't slow it down and doesn't pull it fast on the other side. That right there is all the proof you need that gravity is a lie.
I absolutely agree.
Absolutely.
It doesn't make any sense. I don't care if we're in elliptical orbits or what. It just makes no sense that how the ISS needs to constantly adjust what it's doing so it doesn't fall back to Earth because Earth's gravity is pulling it into it. But they also say the sun's gravity is pulling us into the sun. So what is keeping us? Are we squirting jets out so that we keep in our orbit of the sun? No, it just magically stays perfectly in its elliptical orbit. Well, why wouldn't the ISS? It doesn't make any sense to me.
And also, again, changing the subject slightly, whenever you get an earthquake of something above 7 or 8, they always say, "Oh, and it slowed down the Earth's rotation just a tiny fraction." The number of
so
times
ridiculous.
a number of times I've said that we should be on a 23-hour day by now.
Yep.
And all the gravity of everything in the universe would, or even just our solar system, would affect everything else. And constantly, supposedly, the Oort cloud or the asteroid belt would be constantly having collisions, and there should be a constant change of gravity happening, even with the fact of how the retrograde planets and the way that they have different orbits, and what is just Neptune's orbit is 200 years, or is it 80 something years? I don't remember. But whatever that is, you would think that there would be so often an adjust. It can't stay, meaning our orbit can't remain the same if every 84 years Neptune comes around and is in the area of influence. Like all that stuff would have to adjust.
All of these planets spinning around and ignoring each other with their massive gravities. It just
makes no
none
sense.
of it makes any sense at all.
And I remember
don't have any
even
thrusters to compensate for any deteriorating orbit either.
no, and I remember talking to Red's rhetoric and really trying to understand it. I was like, dude, just explain it to me. And he says, because he was making fun of my whole idea of get the spaceship up there and wait for the moon. Because he says,
If you take pi r squared times the gravitational constant.
Oh,
yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I didn't carry the 3.
Right.
That was the problem. I carried the 3. All right. No,
And you
I have to
failed
look
to-
at my GPS from my car, and then I'll know exactly where we're at according to that. So he says that, the moon and the Earth travel because they're locked in the same orbit. So they both are going 66,000 miles per hour. So I said, okay, well, we know that Mars is not, correct? He said, no, that goes a different speed. I said, okay, where is the line between us and Mars where it magically changes speed? How can there be a force that's carrying along the Earth and the Moon perfectly, 66,000 miles per hour, and then Mars is going a different speed? Well, where the hell does the emptiness of space change to be a different speed of emptiness of space? It makes absolutely no sense. And it would constantly be changing, and then they say they just send spacecraft out there, and they know exactly how to get it to Pluto, where even though it's going through our speed, as soon as you launch it, it's got to be going 66,000 miles per hour with the Earth. Then it's going to cross at some point, which how would you ever know that, into Mars's speed. It's just drives me crazy because they cannot explain it, and they like to put up pages on Wikipedia that have a bunch of R's and little alpha signs, and that's their
I,
explanation.
I'd just like to say you mentioned the speed of well they they mainly say it's 67,000 miles an hour, but if you notice, if you start looking at it, they often say it in terms of I think it's 14.5 miles per second. Well,
Yeah, so 66,600.
yes, 666 again. Yes, another fingerprint.
Yep, same thing with the tilt of the Earth, right? It's 23.4%.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Mm-hmm.
then you take that from 90 and you get your fabulous 66. They love their numbers, don't they?
Yes, they do.
So I guess we'll finish off with just discussing a little bit of Max Egan. I'm not sure if everybody saw his little report or his little speech about the flat Earth and why he doesn't find it important. I know Bob saw it, so Bob, we can start with your opinion of it, just because I think it'll be the most fun to hear.
Okay. Well, the whole Max Egan thing was basically centered around the idea that by the flat earthers, discussing flat Earth, that not only was it detracting from the real truth movement, but it was causing dissension and hatred and discontent and low vibrational energy, which of course I'm a big believer in that, because everything is vibrational. But he said that this causing all this dissension and hatred, and ultimately because of that, we were doing ourselves more of a detriment than anything else. And of course, I saw that as completely hypocritical and ridiculous because, there are so many other subjects that raise those kind of, highly charged feelings. Discussions about religion, discussions about politics, other conspiracy theories, and all of those are on a much, much higher, level. And they're much more widely dispersed, much more widely talked about. So theoretically, if you're following that, line of logic, then they would be generating the much greater deal of negative energy. But to me, I see the flat Earth as pretty much the ultimate conspiracy. And when this one falls, they all fall. And so, yes, we definitely have our internal squabbles, with shills and also arguments that break out between people that are indoctrinated with the ball Earth idea, and the flat earthers trying to tell them to open their minds and think. And that's causing some low energy things, and that's why I just don't really think we need to be engaging into those negative aspects of the argument. But for him to come out and say that, and then turn right around and if you listen to him, he talks about, well, it's the governments that are doing this. We got to do something about the governments because they're all wanting all this stuff to happen. But what he's not pointing out is that it's not the governments that are doing it, it's the people behind the governments that are doing this, the ones that are actually pulling the strings of the politicians. Now granted, some of those people are integrated into government, like the Rockefeller clan and stuff like that, but to sit there and advocate the fact that the governments are doing it sounds to me like he's trying to advocate anarchy. And that, frankly, is precisely what they want to happen, because as soon as the people turn against their governments and all of this hate and discontent starts going down and rioting and governments falling and then burning down the White House and stuff like that, then that gives the UN basically the power to come and step in and take over all of these governments and UN to the rescue. Yes, the governments were terrible, and now we're just going to instill this one world government so that this can never happen again. And to me, Max Egan is way off base, and whether it's intentional or not, but he is so way off base in that line of thinking that, frankly, it just made me angry listening to it, because I could not disagree more with what he is saying. So that's kind of my take on it.
Okay. And I actually talked to Max on a Skype call. It was after he gave that report, but we were trying to meet up before that. And I gave him my opinion, and we ended the conversation definitely as friends or on the same level, but with just totally different opinions because he understands where I'm coming from and simply saying that it is the key. To me, I see it as a universal key because of its shock value. And he goes on and on about how important it is that we have empathy for Syria and for Israel and what's going on there, and that we should, all step in and end the atrocities that are being committed by our governments. And I certainly agree. There's nothing about that I don't agree with. But I also say that you could bring up a commercial that said, we dropped 200 bombs on Syria today, and I can only speak for most Americans, but I know that it wouldn't make many bat their eye. They wouldn't even so much as hear the news report or even care. And that's where I think that you don't want to be yelling upon deaf ears. But in my opinion, when you say the Earth is flat, every single person flies out of their lazy boy and says, "What'd he say?" And it's not just a matter of, oh, I want to scream something, I want to scream fire so people wake up, because then if they just looked and found nothing, well, then they're just going to lay back down and not listen to you the next time. But the difference is this is provable. This is something that if somebody really starts looking into, and how many times have we all heard somebody say, I started hearing this flat earth stuff, so I decided I'd sit down and debunk it. And on the other end, they come out as a believer. And that's because you can't debunk it. All you can debunk is the nonsense that we were all taught in school was fact, that we should believe because it was fact, and it was what was told to us was science, and it had been studied and tested. And if you really start to dig into it and say, well, where was it tested? And you start to look into some of these experiments and Airy's failure and Michelson-Morley, when you start to really dig into the history of science, you can see that there's deceit. There is clear issues with calling something science and teaching us all science is great because it goes through the scientific method, and who wouldn't agree with that? Now, the secret is you sneak some things in there and say, this has been scientifically proven, and immediately everyone assumes, well, it's a scientific fact, therefore it's gone through step 1, step 2, tested, sent through a journal, and approved. But if that's not the case, if it's simply been called a fact and put in front of us as a fact, then we should be able to go back. And also, nobody should question if we want to test that, because the point of science is retesting, and the point of science is trying to disprove current beliefs so you can get closer to the truth. But when we came along and said, hey, we're going to try and test some of these things, why did we get a backlash of people who immediately jump on you and want to beat you to the ground? Well, it's because they were taught you're an idiot if you think the earth is flat. But again, I've said it a million times, there's those 5 or 6 things you're an idiot if you believe. And I'm starting to think they told us that for a very plain and obvious reason. You're an idiot if you think that we didn't go to the moon. And you're an idiot if you think the earth is flat. And you're an idiot if you think 9/11 could have possibly been at the hands of your government. And so to me, I think we just ended it. He didn't seem upset or anything about what I was saying. I just simply told him I don't think that there's any reason to not go after it. And yeah, I understand what he's saying about the dissension that we're causing, because you're going to have people fight back. But if we just simply back down to that battle, that's what got us here. Is there was people in the 1700s and 1800s who felt very strongly that it was not a globe, and unfortunately they got sat down, or they got called crazy and sent off to the loony bin, to the point where it scared others to not want to bring it up. And so what happens is slowly you have those people disappear from the minds of people, and people just accept what they're told. And I'm happy to be a part of the hopefully the reawakening of people to realize that it's okay to be stupid. because that just means you're not sure and you want to look into it. And that idea of being stupid and looking into things to me is so much more attractive than somebody calling me smart simply because I listen to what other men tell me to say, and I parrot them very well, and I can do their little mathematical equations that have nothing to do with reality. They cannot even come close to projecting reality. Again, I look at your body, look at your arm right now. Tell me the mathematical equation that can tell you how your arm works, or the length of your arm, or how your fingers move. There's no mathematical equation for that because it's reality. It's not math. Math is for a 2D plane on paper with triangles and all these things that are in a perfect land, not this earth that's got undulations and elevations and changes in every direction, yet we're using geometry which says perfect square, rectangle, triangle, circle. So to me, it's just, you can't be quiet about it. At this point, I know I can't, because I'm just basically backing down to the establishment, and then I'm no better than the people I'm so upset at, is the people who just took it on the chin and just said, no, I'm not going to say anything about it. And I know everyone, and I know none of people want to admit it, but we all looked like, with that crazy look on our face when we were told the earth spins. Nobody got told that as a kid and said, makes sense. Okay. And nobody today is outside looking at the sky or looking at the sunrise or the sunset or the moonrise or moonset and staring at it and saying, oh, I'm the one spinning. Okay, makes sense. And if you say that, I think you're lying. I think you're lying to yourself. I think you're lying to others. It is set up in a way that you don't get confused. And the reason you do is because you'd rather listen to somebody, take their word for it, and be called smart than to take the chance that somebody might call you stupid. Heaven forbid. So, Dave, your opinion of it? Dave Weiss first.
I agree with everything you said. You said exactly what I would say. There's my opinion.
All right, Dave. Allegedly, Dave.
Well, I like Max. I've been listening to him since 2008 or 2009 or something like that. I've really sort of gone along with everything he's pretty much said. But I got turned off when he started his rants against the flat Earth. There's always going to be, this idea that, a brand new idea or brand new truth that's uncovered is going to call all the other truths into question. It's always going to discredit the truth movement when you have something new, because anything we discover is going to be radical and unbelievable. So you're always going to get it. As I said earlier, when I was in the conspiracy movement, and I started going on the Freeman movement. I was told I was bringing the conspiracy movement, the truth movement, into question by my crazy Freeman ideas. Then I went into urine therapy, and now that's bringing ridicule on the truth movement. And then the flat Earth. Well, and there you go again. So it's always going to happen. So why keep doing this? It's all of it's truth. All of it is valid. The other thing is that yes, things like what's going on in Gaza, fracking and chemtrails and all that stuff is important, but I think it's actually minor details compared to the big picture. And that big picture is, we've discovered that essentially this is the universe, and it's a created universe, and we are central to that creation. I mean, that's the biggest story ever. And as I said at the end of my video, that once the whole world realizes that simple truth, the whole universe has to change, just like it's changed us. I mean, we're not the same people as we were before we found this. I don't know about everyone else, but I I can't go past seeing the moon anymore. You know, if I see the moon, I have to stare at it for a while and think, what is that? You know.
Right. I
No,
have to I have to just empathize with Max a little bit. You know, he has seen horrors that most of us probably can't handle, and he's done so much to try to help these people and get some traction with other frustration of the apathy across the globe. And then all of a sudden, this flat Earth thing comes in and starts just distracting and diverting. And I could see his frustration there. It's just he doesn't see that this might be the solution to his problem, to all of the horror that's going on Earth. If people wake up to this, this could change everything.
Exactly.
You know why I think he misses it, and this is something he clearly said in our hour Skype. And you know, I agree with you, Dave, that I like Max. In fact, talking to him, nothing about what he was saying came across as a shill or he's trying to do this for a reason. It seems to me he is a very loving and caring person for the atrocities happening in the world. And I agree with him 100% when he says that, you know, if we jaywalk, we'll get arrested, but yet we allow our government leaders to commit crimes minute by minute by minute every single day, and none of us do anything. When there's laws in place, the laws don't say they just apply to us and not the president or the governor or the you know, anybody, any leader of any other country. The laws are across the board. We need to hold those people responsible for their atrocities, and we just don't. Where I think he misses the point on the flat Earth is he thinks it's such a problem because it can't be proven, and that's where I think he's missed the point. The point is it can be proven. The
Right.
point is that it can be shown that it is definitely a more applicable model to reality than what we've been told. So why are we choosing to accept something that doesn't meet our reality just because somebody says it's the truth when there's no proof of it?
There's so many people out there that just don't. Even Max, he says if I quote him correctly, he goes, you know what? I haven't looked into it enough. He goes, but even if it is flat, it doesn't matter. So just that general thinking there, he hasn't processed the implications behind.
Yeah, he said that exact thing to me too.
Exactly.
And,
But you know something about that. And first of all, let me kind of clarify a little bit, you know, about Max. I've listened to the Crow House for years. I've been sub to him for years, and I agree. He is out there really doing his part, trying to, you know, expose a lot of things. But you know, it really got me kind of passionate about, you know, his response about the flat Earth, because you know, it sounds more like he's saying that you know, the flat Earth is just this inconsequential thing that's only causing problems in him exposing governments, and I just had to really take exception to that. But I mean, I love Max, I love his work, but on this particular issue, I just really can't see eye to eye with him whatsoever.
And the things he brings up obviously bring up dissension too. It's not as if he brings up something and nobody disagrees with him. So, you know, to just say, well, people are going to disagree with this, which is going to cause ruffles. Well, I mean, just like allegedly Dave said, I mean, no matter what things people bring up, somebody's going to feel like that's not the right issue to be talking about at that particular time. And I look at all the possible things in the world, and there's nothing that could wake humanity and bring us together like what needs to happen. I mean, there's just 50,000 of those guys walking around running the world, and there's, you know, say there's 4 or 5 billion, who knows, however many of us that there are, our collective energy, if we ever came together and just said, and just realized that the people in Iran don't hate me, the people in Afghanistan don't hate me, and they should know that I don't want to bomb anyone. And if we all just woke up to the fact that there's somebody pulling the strings and doing all these things, and we let them. So your government official is representing you. They're representative. And so if we just continue to pass it off as, well, yeah, our government does bomb people, but we're America, they must be doing it for the right reason. No, you know, that's not right. That you are giving them permission to take other people's lives. And so I do I do side with him on that. That I wish we could wake people up, but I see the flat Earth as a way to get everyone to realize it isn't us against them kind of thing, because there's a very small group of people that are holding the biggest secret there is, and if you could break that to humanity, maybe that's the key where everyone could turn and say, well, we all were stupid. We all accepted what was just told to us. We all even preached it as being the truth. Now we realize we've been fooled. We got to turn the tables as a collective group of fools to show them that he who laughs last laughs loudest. You know?
You know, I will. Max is going through, and it's taking a little bit longer than it may have for some of us, but especially me. When I first learned about Flat Earth, I had people posting on my Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole pages saying, hey, check this out, check this out. I would just delete for months on end, and the ones that kept posting it, I banned them from my page before ever looking, being the biggest hypocrite on Earth. And then something made me look, and I came across Dave's video, The Biggest Lie Ever Told, and then I got Mark Sargent, and I then started realizing, and I changed, and I think that there's time, eventually Max is going to come around. When I started my podcast, I was doing 9/11 Boston, and then I tried to introduce Sandy Hook, and people weren't ready for it. My other co-hosts are like, no, we can't do that yet, and I'm like, it was a hoax, and it polarized the audience, but then it brought everybody back together. The fact that they're all are hoaxes. So I think this is the same thing. It's just a little more hard programmed and a hard program to break in people.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, especially the Sandy Hook thing. I think there was so much backlash on that because of the fact that it involved kids allegedly dying. And people were just saying, oh, how can you be so cruel, and that's a horrible thing. And that, it's kind of just like a shoot from the hip reaction. But, the fact is that in Sandy Hook, it's pretty clear that none of that happened. In fact, I have serious doubts whether or not Sandy Hook was even open during that time. I've heard stories that it was actually being used by one of the local storage companies for holding stuff there because it had been condemned for some chemical. What is it? Asbestos. It had been condemned for asbestos contamination. So you look at that stuff, and then you look at all the fake footage, and that movie that I think you were in, right? That you did called "We Need to Talk About Sandy Hook." Is that right?
Yeah, I collaborated on that. Yes.
Yes, fantastic movie. You, Professor Doom One, who I also follow very religiously. Some of the best investigators out there were collaborating on that, and I applaud you on that, Dave, for that, because it was just a fantastic effort, and it really brought a lot of stuff.
I wasn't in the movie. I just collaborated some facts on the backside. So it was a group effort, and it was amazing. Without we can talk about Sandy Hook for another 3 hours. I just wanted to make a comment for how to plant. I was planting some amazing seeds. Like I have my truth-seeking friends, and then I have the friends that I've grown up with, and you can't just come out and say, hey, the earth is flat, because they already think I'm crazy for 9/11. But we were sitting at the beach 24.5 miles from the Whitestone Bridge, and it was a perfectly clear day, and with binoculars you can clearly see underneath the deck of the bridge. Well, the top of the bridge, the highest part of the bridge, the stanchions are 340 feet or something up, and at that distance, they should be below the horizon. So I would just stand there and say, I was like, I go, you see that bridge? I go, how is it possible that we can see under it right now? And then you don't say anything else. You just let them think about it, and then over the days, you just throw another seed at them, and people are waking up faster than you would believe. That was a little long-winded. Sorry.
No problem. No, I agree. And you have to kind of plant just little things for people to contemplate, because obviously if they think about it for a second, it's like, wait a minute, if we're only supposed to be able to see so far into the horizon or to the horizon before it drops off, then you just it kind of plants that seed in their head, and there's like, well, wait a minute, why are we able to see this? And I do that with all kinds of little things when I'm trying to turn people onto the flat Earth. I show them, not only will I start with like NASA's and their failures and their scuba tank stuff, but I'll do stuff like taking a globe and saying, okay, well, if there's 24 hours in a day, spinning that around, and showing the relative position where it's going to be tomorrow, and then in 6 months you've got the sun behind the globe, just stuff like that. They think about it, and you don't really have to say much more because that just starts them thinking. They're like, going, wow, that's really weird. What's the thing with that? And then you can kind of, feed those thoughts to them, kind of a reverse psychology kind of thing, and it really works very well for me.
Yeah, I have a buddy who I still wouldn't say is a full believer yet, but there was a lot of things I was throwing out there, and nothing was sticking until I kind of was laughing at the speeds and the distances. It seemed like that's what awoke him to want to start looking into it, is just saying, and just kind of in passing, I was just saying, just crazy, spinning 1,000 miles per hour, 66,000 miles per hour around the sun, 584 million miles in a year, and he kind of just, wait, what? And I said, yeah, that's what you believe. That's what you have to believe if you want to believe in that. And he's like, no, we don't go 584 million miles. It's like, no, that's how fast we go. That's how far we go. And yet at the same time, then you kind of can bring in how far the sun's going, which the sun itself is traveling, crazy distances. And in total, we end up going in a year 14 billion miles. Yet when we get to the start of the year again, the stars have reset and they're right back where they were at the beginning of the year above our heads. Yet you traveled 14 billion miles, and that is simply impossible.
Did you hear the interview Mark Sargent did with the guy that was in the Navy and the experiment he did on his house?
I have not heard it yet.
He set up two planks. He built like a little structure, and he drilled a hole in one and lined it up with Polaris, and then a couple feet from that he had another plank, drilled a hole in it, and lined it up through the other hole. So you have to look through two holes, which means that you can't vary your angle. And he lined Polaris up with it, nailed it into his deck so it was unmovable, and he filmed it with in time lapse for 6 months or 8 months, 10 months. And Polaris never moved from the pinhole. Impossible.
Yep, that's right.
Didn't vary at all.
Wow. It's crazy.
Yeah, that was the Mark Sargent interview that you're talking about, right?
Mark's latest interview. It's great.
Right. God, that was just
listen to it.
Yeah, he was amazing. I mean, he was so and obviously I know a little bit about radar and everything that he was talking about. Rang absolutely true with me about all the technical specifications he gave, what he was able to give. But it all made so much perfect sense, and I loved his take, even looking at the parallax, and there are just so many missing variables that made no sense whatsoever. And it's kind of cool that he had talked to some of his shipmates about it too, and they were somewhat of the same belief, maybe not as openly, vocal about it. But it's good to know that the military people are actually kind of looking at this stuff too and going, wait a minute, something's not right here.
Yeah, a huge one for me, and I often have trying to figure out a way to show everybody this, and maybe it's just go out and videotape it, but to think that if I go stand in my driveway, and my house faces exactly north, but if I stand in my driveway and look north out into the north sky, to see what the stars are doing, and then to know that during the day, the stars are still there. It just so happens that the sun is in the sky behind me and washing them out. But to watch that complete rotation and then imagine that it was me who spun around in a circle and ended up in rotation all the way around back at the same location looking at the same spot, you simply realize that it's a hoax. It's not me. I did not move at all. I'm still facing the same direction, still facing the same northern sky, and it's not as if it's like you have to be spinning on the globe. I can understand if somebody said, again, you're on that top portion and you're just kind of turning like a CD, but that's not true. It's not true at all. where everyone is turning like a CD. No, the ball has to spin in unison. It just does not make any kind of sense. And to me, it gets frustrating because all I do all day is try and figure out ways. Bob knows how many things do I run by you, Bob. How about this? Now take this thought experiment. All I do is try and come up with ways that I can show what I know is true. Is that everything in our reality just screams to me that what we're taught is not the truth. It works on paper, like I said, it works in theory, but it's finding those simple ways to show everyone so that they get that kind of aha moment, like, wait a second, that doesn't work. And I thought that Joseph Clemere did an excellent job in that video with the cabbage and the oranges, because on my 2D drawing, I think people might have lost the idea because they said, well, our constellations do move, and we do see a different side. Yes, we understand that, but yet if you look at the portion of the sky that you can see, then it's absolutely impossible that you see the stars in the way that we do. It just doesn't make any sense, and I wish there was a way to get it, and maybe we'll find it soon, but I don't know. So I got something kind of exciting. I don't know if you guys know who it is, but next week on the show, we are having an interesting visit. This will be a little bit different than the normal ball Earth versus the flat plains argument, because we have Robert Sungenis on the show. So it's going to be the ball Earth, but the geocentric, non-spinning ball Earth versus the flat Earth. So you ever heard of Robert Sungenis, Dave Weiss? Allegedly, Dave?
No, I haven't actually.
So yeah, check him out. He actually is the producer or writer of a movie called The Principal, which was supposed to come out about 2 years ago, and did have a limited release. He basically could never get it released in a theater. They wouldn't allow him, so he had to do little private things to where he would make a special deal with the owner of said movie theater, and he would say, I'm bringing in 500 people and we'll give you this much money, and made like a side deal. So he was able to actually get it out into a couple theaters, but they would not let him release it like a nationwide movie, which tells you something. There's probably some things in there that they don't want let out, but come November it's supposed to be on DVD. But it'll be interesting because he actually might believe something even crazier than the globe earthers believe. So to me, I can't wait to talk to him. I think it'll be interesting to kind of go battle with somebody who believes definitely something different than the ball Earth, and feels obviously that they can prove it even mathematically. Bob, is that your understanding of geocentricity? It is also not able to be disproved technically, correct?
No, actually, I never heard that before, because honestly, the things that I think about it disprove it in so many ways it's ridiculous, especially when you consider if their model is, the stars rotating around the Earth, except, I believe you said something to the effect of Sungenis thought that they were actually at the distance or near the distance that mainstream science, believes them to be. And if that's true, to me, that's just beyond absurd.
Well, I think, and we'll have to obviously do our homework for the next week, but if I'm not mistaken, they do not believe in the speed of light or relativity. It's one of those. They think relativity is definitely wrong. So I know that it's based on that. I really wish we got to watch that damn movie first, but I guess we'll wait till November like everyone else. But
I do have to say that there is no difference between the geocentric model and the heliocentric model. They're exactly the same. I've got a video that shows both of them at the same time, and you can see that the only difference is your viewpoint.
Right, but if you think about the stars, that the closest star to us is 24 trillion miles away. So in the geocentric world, that star needs to, even the closest one, we're not even talking about the far ones, needs to travel completely around the Earth at a distance of 24 trillion miles to end up where it started in 24 hours. Sure. So to do that, it's going well beyond the speed of light, but again, do we really know if there's a maximum speed of light? Or so this will be interesting to get into with him, because I'm very interested in the theory, except for the part of the ball that's just sitting there, and you still got upside down people, you still have gravity and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it'll be an interesting conversation for sure.
Yeah, I'll be listening.
Dave Weiss, are you gone? Did you fall asleep?
I think he got disconnected or something, Jaron.
All right. Okay. Bob, any final words or anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I think what I had to talk about was just some other flat Earth stuff, as far as
Videos.
videos and stuff like that. But since we're running so incredibly late tonight, I think I'll hold that off for tomorrow night.
Yeah,
And,
give us something to talk about during the downtime when we're black screen, blue screen.
Yeah, exactly.
And I did think it was interesting. Again, I went back and watched the tape, and I don't understand what happened, but if you guys want something to watch that's interesting, watch the last hour of the ISS Live show from last week, which would have been last Tuesday, ISS Live number 3. And we stayed an extra hour because we wanted to go live on this SLU special event where they were going to show the ISS for the first time live, tracked via telescope. And we sat there and waited, and they kept showing some little image of the ISS floating around. And I went back and watched that, Bob. I think it's crazy that anyone could believe that's the ISS. I couldn't even, was trying to watch it and I said, how could that be? The way it's just kind of floating on the screen. I mean, no telescope could have held that position. It was just crazy. And then for them to basically say, all right, hope you enjoyed all the live footage. We'll talk to you later.
And the fact that it was entirely lit up like that, it seemed like there was no part of it that was not lit. And that's why I was saying that I thought, that it was some sort of a drone that was lit, from side to side and front to back.
Absolutely. And actually, it wasn't even lit like brightly enough that you would be able to see the light like we do from Earth.
Oh, I know. It seemed much dimmer.
Yeah, totally. So it's just something I think people should watch because I think that's a big clue. I mean, I had a lot of people who, in debates with me and things, would constantly go to the ISS, bringing it up as proof that space exists, that we can see it with a telescope from Earth, we can see it with our eye from Earth, we can see it on TV, therefore 1 + 1 + 1 is 3. Fact, ISS, space is real. And I think this video really helps to show you that some of the things they say just do not work. And I know they like to show you pictures of the spinning ball on the ISS Live, but check us out tomorrow. I bet you might have a different opinion at the end of it. So, Bob, final words.
That's about all I have for the night. It's been a great evening. Don't know what happened to Dave Weiss. I know he was getting kind of tired, and he had been up very late, so I think maybe he might have dropped out a little bit. But Dave, if you're still listening out there, thanks for joining us, and we really appreciate all your input. And I'd love to talk to you again sometime about some of the other conspiracy stuff that you've researched. Other than that, Dave, allegedly Dave?
Dave is back.
Oh, hey, he's back. All right. So other than that, allegedly Dave, again, I'm actually, we're going to have to do this again with you guys because there are so many things that I wanted to talk to you about, like, distilled water and, a lot of the health issues. I wish we, could go on this all night long, but maybe we'll do it again sometime and get those issues addressed. And I'd love to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I agree.
Good.
TJ, you have final words? Anything?
Nope. I was just going to say hi to Missa, but she's dropped off. Maybe she can still hear me, but no other final words.
She's downstairs, so I'll yell down there for her.
Yeah. Everyone have a good night. It was good having the Daves here.
Dave 1 and Dave 2.
Hey, anybody out there that's looking to wake up their friends, I have 2 Facebook pages that you can just refer them to, or if you happen to be on their phone and computer, just like it without telling them, so it ends up in their feed. One of them is called Exposing the Big Three, and it's just information on Sandy Hook, 9/11, and the Boston bombing. And the other one is Baller Skeptic, which is just about flat Earth.
Yep, they're both really, really good. I would highly recommend those to everybody also.
And I only I create a little content. I make a couple videos here and there, but basically, with my obsessive researching, I just find the best videos and compile them so other people can spend less time looking for them. It's that simple.
And I hate to say this and throw myself under the bus, but I've had too many people repeat the same thing, so I'm just going to say it, that if you want to wake people up and you don't really know how to do it, or you don't want to release something on your Facebook, it's okay to release one of my videos and say, look at this idiot thinks that the earth is flat. You don't believe the amount of people who have emailed me and said they came across my video by somebody posting it on a forum or in Twitter making fun of it, and watched the video and thought it was crazy and wanted to watch another one, and something resonated, wanted to watch another one, and before you knew it, they're emailing me and saying, you're a crazy lunatic, and I appreciate it. So I actually don't mind if you want to not be the person that they all look at as crazy. Just say, can you believe this guy believes that the earth is flat, and drop the video. This way, if somebody comes back at what an idiot, you can play dumb and just say, yeah, I know, I found that video is funny. But I think that just getting the word out there is most important. Let people just hear it, because like I said, for my entire life I questioned the spin. Never made sense to me, never understood it. So it was just kind of somebody just kind of putting that little spark in my head that there's no proof that we're spinning, and then you want to hear a little bit more, and there's a lot of people out there that want to debunk it, that just want to end it, and when they start looking into it, they sometimes get trapped in a little place I like to call reality. So, Dave Weiss, thank you very much for joining us. It was awesome having you, and again, same thing as Bob said, I probably want to have you guys separate sometime so we can actually dig a little deeper into your areas of expertise. But I like both you guys, and liked you both on the Baller Skeptic, and appreciate you guys bringing me aboard there for the 2 shows, and really thought the final show was good. And I actually thought every show you guys did, except for the one with your special guest, Red's Rhetoric, was a really good show and fun to listen to. Any final words, Mr. Allegedly Dave?
I still want Mrs. autograph, if I could.
We'll do that. We'll send it out for you.
Okay, cool. All I've got to say is the earth is flat, everyone. That is all.
Amen.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. So, guys, thanks for joining us. This has been GLOBEBUSTERS number 9, and we'll see you tomorrow night at 6 o'clock Pacific time. We'll be watching the ISS live, and again, we'll have a little vote at the end to see if anybody actually votes that there's a chance that it's real. So far, the score is about 15-0, fake versus real. So we'll see if the real can get 1 vote at some point, but I'm starting to doubt it. And so I'll remind you guys to be nice to each other, don't lie to one another, and don't accuse people of blackmailing and lying about money and treasures and fortunes and all that fun stuff. And open your minds, guys, because there is truth inside, believe it or not. You don't need a book. You just need your eyes. We'll be talking to you tomorrow, so till next time, this is Jeranism. Peace!
Peace.